In the Rotinas Empire, it is said that the phrase, "Do you wish for death?" is a euphemism for mentioning the Grey family in front of someone from the Emblem family, signaling a deeply rooted historical enmity. The Emblem Knights represent the sun and passion, renowned for their valor and strength derived from the sun's glow. In contrast, the Grey Knights stand like moonlight, bearing the responsibility of maintaining noble dignity and poise. These two ancient factions have remained in a state of entrenched rivalry and long-standing hostility. It was believed that compatibility between Emblem and Grey was utterly impossible, even if the world were to end. A firm conviction echoed by a man to his family, astonished by their questioning. Although the nobles themselves passed down this talk, confirming the impossibility of the matter, the day everyone thought would never come arrived sooner than the end of the world as people gathered, in confusion and murmurs before a sudden announcement. Startling news spread that the commander of the Emblem Knights and the commander of the Grey Knights had become close sisters, sparking widespread shock and disbelief among the people. The shock reached such a point that some began to pray, thinking the end of the world had indeed come. However, the reality was that the two commanders, Melcia and Dana, had moved past their enmity and become allied sisters. Amidst this close friendship, Dana, the silver-haired commander of the Greys, suggested that their children be married in the future as a symbol of harmony and peace between the two families. Lady Melcia, the red-haired commander of the Emblem Knights and mother of Curcia, immediately agreed to this proposal. This agreement was the reason behind the arranged marriage of Curcia Emblem to the Grey family at a tender age. However, Circia, who appeared in a fit of rage wearing a wedding veil over her military uniform, harbored intense hatred for her fiancé, whom she considered the worst member of the Grey family. Her fiancé was Enoch Grey, whom she regarded as her arch-rival and sworn enemy throughout time. Driven by her anger, she threw her wedding veil to the ground, expressing her extreme resentment toward this forced engagement. Her maid remarked that Lady Circia looked as if she were attending a funeral rather than an engagement ceremony, worriedly asking if she truly intended to complete the ritual in her official knight's uniform. Curcia coldly replied that she would not change her clothes, much to the shock of her maid, who protested that a noble lady should not attend her engagement in such an appearance. Curcia mockingly asked what was wrong with her official uniform, considering it perfectly matched the color of her hair, leading her maid to call out her name in despair. Circia then proudly declared that wearing her Emblem Knight Commander uniform was the highest form of respect she could offer on this occasion. Sighing, her maid said she wouldn't stop her if she was insistent, but she drew her attention to another matter. The maid tried to prevent her from carrying her sword, fearfully asking if she planned to attack Lord Enoch, to which Circia hinted she might do so if necessary. At that point, the maid seriously asked if she truly understood how this marriage came to be. Circia mockingly replied that the whole thing happened because their mothers wanted to show off their friendship. The maid was shocked by this response and reminded her that she had taken history lessons and should not be ignorant of the significance of what was happening. With tearful eyes, the maid, Jessia, tried to explain the historical importance of this engagement between the Emblem and Grey families and how delegations from foreign lands had come to offer. Congratulations. Circia asked why she was crying, and Jessia replied that everyone had waited a long time for this union, and that Circia's reckless behavior upset them. Circia sighed and told her she knew everything, which raised Jesia's suspicions. Circia explained her cynical perspective, saying she recognized the history of the conflict, but believed the reason for this crowd was that people found it entertaining to watch two rival commanders like her and Enoch Grey get married. She said this with a wide grin while clenching her fist, prompting Jessia to shout her name once more in frustration. Circia laughed and told Jessia not to worry too much, then calmly revealed that a week had already passed since Enoch Grey disappeared in the Forest of Beasts, and if they were lucky, the engagement ceremony would be cancelled today. Terror gripped Josiah upon hearing this, and she shouted at her that she shouldn't say such things, as something terrible might have happened to her future fiancé. In the middle of her speech, the atmosphere was interrupted by a sudden noise at the door. Circia appeared confused for a moment, wondering what the problem was. 3 knights fell to the ground in a state of chaos, prompting Circia to sternly question why they were there. The knights were flustered and tried to justify their presence. Their leader told Circia they came to correct a false rumor that she would be wearing a dress to the ceremony while one blamed the other. Circia commanded them to speak clearly and explain why her knights were in such a place. The eldest knight explained that since their commander did not desire this engagement, they thought it best for her to rest, which shocked her maid, Jisia. Then the knights enthusiastically revealed they had prepared an escape route for her and were ready to escort her out as soon as she ordered. Jessia was terrified by this suggestion and asked her lady in despair if she was seriously considering fleeing her own engagement ceremony. Jessia reminded her that they were in the Imperial Banquet Hall and that the Emperor himself would preside over this highly significant ceremony. Circia strictly declared that as the commander of the Emblem Knights, she could not do something as disgraceful as fleeing, but at the same time, she would not sit waiting forever for the return of Enoch, who might have already perished while hunting monsters. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise and joy, Circia decided to move forward with the ceremony and conclude it immediately. Behind this decision, Circia was hiding a cunning plan. She intended to complete the ritual quickly in Enoch's absence, to later use his absence as a pretext to annul the engagement and get rid of it. Circia approached the bishop and called to him. He welcomed her in turn and told her everything was ready for the ceremony, though he seemed somewhat hesitant. The bishop thought she had come out of concern for Sir Enoch, whose news had been cut off, and suggested she pray for his safety, but she coldly replied that she would rather hit him herself than have him die in the forest of beasts, and that it didn't concern her. The bishop was surprised by her harsh reply, but commented on her steadfast character. Circia ignored his words and focused on her main request. She sternly asked him to start the ceremony immediately, leaving the bishop stunned, wondering how she could proceed alone while her fiancé was still missing. Circia insisted that fool wouldn't come today, and that it wasn't proper to turn away the guests. So the bishop began to warn her of the consequences of this action. Circia finished his sentence, acknowledging she knew that completing the ritual alone would make her unable to marry again and she would live alone for the rest of her life. But she was secretly rejoicing because she would gain her freedom once the engagement was annulled. The bishop was deeply moved, tears streaming down his face as he completely misunderstood her intentions, believing she was showing a profound lack of worldly desire, and immediately agreed to hold the ceremony. Circia was overjoyed, realizing the bishop had greatly misunderstood her, but she didn't care as long as Enoch wasn't there to ruin her plan. With the sounding of trumpets, the bishop called Lady Circia forward to officially begin the ceremony. As she walked forward, she heard the whispers of the guests wondering about Sir Enoch's whereabouts and their desire to see him. She shared their desire in her heart, but for a cynical reason. Circia addressed the guests in her mind with a cunning look, asserting that she heard everything and wondering how they could talk like that when they knew how unlucky Enoch was. Circia brushed these thoughts aside, her only concern being to finish the ceremony quickly and go home to rest, before the shadow of a man appeared at the brightly lit entrance of the hall. Circia turned to look, as shock filled the faces of those present who realized the newcomer had just returned from a dangerous place. Standing there was Sir Enoch Grey himself, showing signs of exhaustion in battle, his armor shattered and stained with blood. Enoch looked directly at Circia with a slight smile and mockingly asked if she was really planning to complete the engagement without him. Circia stood shocked, wondering how he arrived here in such a horrific state, while he approached her and told her he had to come because he had a question he wanted to ask her, calling her by the nickname Serio. Circia exploded in anger and disgust, shouting at him that she had warned him repeatedly against using that nickname, which made her nauseous. Enoch ignored her, outburst, grabbed her chin firmly, and spoke cryptic words about lost memory, wondering how she could not recognize him when he was standing right in front of her, increasing her confusion and astonishment. He cut her off before she could speak, saying none of that mattered, then approached her. Leaning in, Circia's eyes widened in absolute shock as she realized he was kissing her in front of everyone. Unable to comprehend what was happening, rage took hold of Circia as she felt Enoch Grey's kiss, cursing him in her mind for his insolent act. It wasn't just her. Her knights were fuming at the sight of their commander being insulted this way, shouting sharply in condemnation of this man's audacity to touch their leader. In the midst of this chaos, Circia was still in a state of shock, unable to believe that Enoch was actually kissing her at this moment and in front of everyone. Enoch pulled back slightly and, in a mocking tone, asked if she hadn't missed him, leaving Circia in such confusion and turmoil that she couldn't speak. But the real shock came when he whispered a single word in her ear. "Detective?" making her jump in place and ask him in astonishment about the meaning of his words. This word brought back long-forgotten memories to Circia's mind, memories of a distant past. Even further back, it was her profession in her previous life, and she wondered in horror how this man could know such a secret. She asked him in a trembling voice how he knew this word. Enoch smiled a smile that made her notice a familiar look in his eyes, a look that awakened a terrifying realization of his true identity. As they say that enemies meet at narrow bridges, Circia realized she hadn't met her enemy on a bridge, but in her engagement hall. This was her enemy from her previous life. Her memories began to flood back, returning to the first day of her current life, a day supposedly impossible for anyone to remember, when she was an infant in the loving arms of her parents. Her father was praising her beauty, which she inherited from her mother, Mel, expressing his pride in the child who would bear the name Emblem. Her parents had high hopes for her, believing she was the child who would end the long-standing hatred between the Grey and Emblem families and lead them toward harmony. However, Circia remembered that day with absolute clarity. Her loud crying was not the cry of a newborn, but an expression of the fact that she wasn't just an infant, but a detective from the Republic of Korea reincarnated in this new body. Her parents interpreted her crying as a sign of health and strength, rejoicing in the thought that their child would grow up to help many people. But in truth, her hysterical crying and violent actions, such as pulling her mother's hair, were expressions of her shock and confusion at the strange situation she suddenly found herself in. Her last memory moments before her birth was chasing a criminal, not just an ordinary criminal, but her arch-enemy and the killer of her parents in her previous life. She was running after him, shouting for him to stop, in a desperate attempt to catch him. She was certain she had succeeded in grabbing him in that final moment. But that was her last memory before finding herself in this new world, leaving her with a deep sense of frustration, regret, and misery. Her crying as a baby was actually an echo of her rage and her desire to throw that criminal into prison, while her new parents thought her voice was as sweet as a canary's. And so her new life began, surrounded by loving parents, but carrying within her a raging anger because she had let her enemy escape punishment. No one, not even her parents, could understand the feelings of a daughter born with full memory and indescribable sorrow on her first day. Over time, after the initial shock, Circia began to accept the idea that life in this new world might not be bad, especially with the maids who cared for her lovingly, admiring how small and beautiful she was. Perhaps because she was reborn as a charming child, she began to feel that things might be better. She enjoyed the maids' exaggerated reactions to any movement she made and began to think that this life could indeed be pleasant and peaceful. But this calm was occasionally broken by the voice of the head maid scolding the others, warning them of the master's arrival at any moment. Despite this peaceful routine, there was one thing that worried and annoyed Circia after living in this place for a few days. She heard the maids whispering, wondering if the master would come to see his wonderful granddaughter, and how he could ignore her all this time. The source of this annoyance was her grandfather, the head of the Emblem family, who strongly opposed any reconciliation with the Grey family. Because of his opposition, he had expelled her mother from the main palace, refusing to recognize them as part of the Emblem family, something Circia, as a child, didn't care much about. In fact, she felt completely happy in her current situation. Unlike her previous life full of conflict and chases, all she wanted now was to lie down, play, and eat in peace. Amidst her calm, loud voices suddenly rose as one of the maids scolded the others for not cleaning the place well, ordering them to hurry because the master had chosen to come in the absence of the child's parents, requiring special arrangements. One of the maids approached the child Circia, who woke up to the noise, wondering to herself about the reason for all this commotion. The maid hurriedly told Circia that her grandfather, the head of the family, would arrive soon on an emergency visit, which made the child mutter incomprehensible sounds while trying to process the situation. The maid saw this visit as an opportunity for Circia to win her grandfather's favor and begged her not to cry, assuring her she was naturally beautiful. A voice was heard ordering everyone to line up, so the maid realized the grandfather had already arrived. And Circia began to feel nervous as well, wondering about the personality of this man who inspired such awe. A majestic man entered while the servants, led by the butler, stood in a line to receive him. The grandfather appeared, a man with fiery red hair and beard, wearing a luxurious military uniform, and in a harsh tone, he asked for the location of Melricia's daughter. He was surrounded by a dark and terrifying aura, making Circia immediately realize why it was said he was the most aggressive knight commander in history. From her cradle, her grandfather seemed truly terrifying to her, and she was certain this was the man who hated her and rejected her existence. The butler stepped forward tentatively to introduce the child, saying she was Lady Circia Emblem, and the grandfather flew into a rage. With a thunderous voice, he shouted, questioning the audacity that allowed them to give the child the name Emblem without his permission. With his shout, a massive force was emitted that made the butler cough blood without even being touched, falling to his knees begging for forgiveness. Circia was deeply shocked, wondering how he could make him bleed without touching him. The red aura surrounded the grandfather, witnessing his terrifying power that left the butler helpless before him. Circia remembered hearing about his swordsmanship surpassing human limits, but what she saw exceeded all her imaginations. Fear gripped her, and she felt he was more terrifying than any armed criminal she had faced in her previous life. But suddenly, the grandfather looked at her and asked with relative calm if the child doesn't eat, noting her small size. The butler hurried to assure him that the young lady eats well, and the grandfather settled for a grunt. The grandfather turned to leave, muttering in disdain how his daughter Melricia managed to give birth to something resembling an anchovy, leaving Circia shocked by this strange comparison. Circia's concern turned to the butler, and she tried with her babbling to ask him if he was okay. The man understood her and felt grateful for her concern. The butler reassured her and revealed a small bottle of fake blood, explaining that he always carries it to elicit sympathy in emergencies, and that this is one of the survival skills the servants of the Emblem family must master. Circia was greatly impressed by his cunning, realizing this man possessed amazing survival skills. Since her grandfather hated her so much, Circia decided she must develop a plan to deal with him. At that moment, her mother Melricia returned, calling out for Circia and asking about her father. The child smiled and began babbling at her. The butler told her that the master had just left, and Melricia laughed in amusement, saying he must have fled so as not to be caught admiring his granddaughter. Melricia proudly declared that victory was hers, while the butler remarked that the grandfather didn't even look back as he left. Melricia carried her daughter and asked if she wanted to know what really happened, while the butler confirmed that the grandfather had completely lost the round. Melricia revealed her simple plan. She had been sending photos of Circia to her father every day. Her goal was to make him see how his only granddaughter was growing day by day. Then with a wink, she revealed her final trick. She had stopped sending photos only yesterday, which prompted him to come rushing because he couldn't stand one day without seeing her. Melricia laughed, declaring her victory, while Circia was in a state of bewilderment, unable to believe that her stern grandfather, who disowned her and called her an anchovy, had been defeated by this simple plan. The butler agreed that this was definitive proof that the master adored his granddaughter, and Melrisha happily asked her daughter if she was pleased to know how much her grandfather loved her. Circia burst into angry tears, wondering to herself how this could be an expression of affection for a granddaughter and condemning the truth of what she heard. Her mother misunderstood her crying, hugging her lovingly and saying her smart child understands everything, while Circia realized that communication between them was non-existent. However, she couldn't deny the fact that she had to acknowledge her grandfather's love soon. Signs of this love began to manifest, as the butler presented Circia with luxurious and rare dishes consisting of totok heart and marrock's liver soup, delicacies of priceless value. The butler noticed she was trembling and asked worriedly if she was okay. Circia realized at that moment that she certainly felt her grandfather's love, but this love was greatly exaggerated. The table was filled with countless varieties of land and sea delicacies, making her secretly wish this excessive generosity would stop. She couldn't take it anymore, so she fled from the table, shouting inside herself for her grandfather's love to stop, while the butler chased her trying to force her to eat more. Circia was screaming in frustration. How could she have known that her grandfather called her an anchovy because she truly looked like one then, and she didn't realize that a greater ordeal was waiting for her. In another scene, a lady from the Grey family was carrying a small white-haired child, showing him a picture of Circia, introducing her to him as his future fiancé. The lady advised her son Enoch to always be kind to Lady Circia, but the small child ignored the matter and threw her picture on the ground. This was Circia's first encounter with her biggest headache in life, her arch enemy, Enoch. After several years, Circia grew up to be the only daughter of the Emblem family, living in a magnificent palace. Her favorite person in the house was undoubtedly her father. She would call him as soon as she saw him, and he would respond with tenderness, inviting her to come to him. And when he carried her after she refused to eat more food, he would comfort her with wisdom, saying that even the most delicious foods become boring when there's too much. Circia felt extremely happy because her father understood her so well. Above all, his wonderful features and warm smile filled her heart with joy. This love was so mutual that the servants were desperate to convince her to eat more of the 12 dishes the chef had specially prepared for her. Circia found great pleasure in listening to the stories her father read to her, even if they were cliché stories. And her father noticed her passion for reading and was very happy about it. In one of these quiet moments, while she was enjoying her father's presence, the butler interrupted them to inform Lord Benedict that the master had arrived. Her father noticed that his arrival was early today and concluded that he must have come because he missed seeing Circia. But for Circia, it was completely different. Just as there are people you love, there are also those you hate. And her grandfather, who claimed to love her, was at the top of the list. His style and actions were extremely arrogant and overbearing. Her father noticed her annoyance, asking if she found her grandfather uncomfortable, and reassured her that everything he says stems from his love for her if she listens to him carefully. He asked her to trust him and listen to her grandfather attentively this time, making Circia wonder if what her father said was true. She began to think about it, remembering that all those delicious foods were very expensive, and some required being caught by hand. She realized then that her grandfather, that old man, must have been running himself to catch these delicacies for her. But what her grandfather said next dispelled all her doubts. He looked at her with resentment and said her arms and legs still looked like rotten branches. Circia was shocked by this insult, while her father welcomed his father's arrival. The grandfather continued his scolding, complaining that he sends her all these good things, but she meets him with a frowning face and that she is just as insolent as her mother. Circia exploded in anger, shouting at him in childish voices that described him in her head as a damn bastard. Her father whispered in her ear, interpreting that the master was worried because she wasn't gaining weight. But in reality, he was saying she resembles her mother Melcia and is very beautiful, while Circia commented to herself that her father was wrong in his understanding. The grandfather called him by name, Benedict, and asked if it wasn't time for Melrisha's daughter to walk. Benedict answered in the affirmative, asserting that she walks well now. Circia was shocked and felt very embarrassed, wondering if her grandfather had come at this early hour just to see her first steps. The grandfather repeated, asking if she truly walks, and her father confirmed that she balances well and even runs. Anger took hold of the grandfather as he realized he had missed his granddaughter's first steps. Everything began to shake around Circia, who wondered if it was an earthquake. While her father tried to calm her, it was clear the grandfather felt overwhelming disappointment because he hadn't witnessed that important moment, and anger at someone else took hold of him. With incredible speed, the grandfather dashed out shouting the name Jed Grey. Her father and Circia were stunned by this superhuman speed, and the child wondered how a human could move this way. As she learned later, what happened was that when the head of the Grey family, Jed Grey, learned of her first steps, he deliberately sent a message to her grandfather to mock him, expressing his happiness because he didn't miss his grandson Enoch's first steps, and wishing the grandfather wouldn't miss Circia's steps either, which enraged her grandfather intensely. While eating her soup, Circia began to be convinced by what her father said. Perhaps her grandfather was only harsh in his words, but in reality, he loves and cherishes her, acting strangely because he doesn't know how to express his feelings. Circia's family was on their way to the Duchy of Grey, the home of Enoch's family. Although Circia was in a child's body, she realized with her adult mind that what was happening was important. Her parents were exaggerating and praising her beauty, making her secretly ask them to stop, as all the words they used carried the same meaning. Her father jokingly claimed he kept checking her back for angel wings because he feared another angel would come to take her away, which made Circia feel embarrassed by these exaggerations. Her mother revealed there was a reason for wearing these luxurious clothes today, and she and her father jokingly worried that Enoch would fall in love with Circia at first sight and suffer from lovesickness. Circia suddenly realized that today was the day of her meeting with that boy, her fiancé, Enoch Gray. She felt strange and anxious. If they met at this age and grew up together, would there be any romantic feelings between them when they grew up? It seemed wrong. She decided she must do something to make them return home instead of completing this meeting. But before she could do anything, one of the maids announced that Lady Dana Gray and her husband, Lord Edward Gray, and the little Lord Enoch Gray had arrived. Circia was shocked by their sudden arrival, and at that moment Lady Dana entered, calling out enthusiastically to her friend, Melcia. The two friends hugged warmly, and Melcia expressed how much she missed Dana, saying that if she had known the separation would be long, she would have left her work. Circia was watching the situation, feeling that all the rumors about them being rivals seemed trivial before this true friendship. Her mother and Aunt Dana seemed truly happy. Melcia apologized to her friend, saying that in her happiness to see her, she almost forgot the reason for their meeting today, which was to introduce her to her precious daughter. Melcia presented her daughter, saying, "This is Circia," and Dana expressed great admiration for the child's beauty, noting she looks exactly like her mother. Dana jokingly said she wanted to take the child to her house now, and Circia's father jokingly refused the request. Melcia asked Dana to also introduce her to Enoch, and Dana immediately agreed. Dana called for her husband Edward to bring the child. Edward stepped forward carrying a white-haired infant, presenting him by saying, "This is Enoch." Circia looked at her infant fiancé and felt there was something strange in his eyes, but she wasn't sure if this was a true feeling or just an illusion. Her father encouraged her to greet him, but she felt nauseous and the urge to vomit just by looking at him. Her mother and Dana noticed the tension between the two children, finding the situation cute and funny. Dana asked her son to greet Lady Circia, but Circia felt a strange dizziness that increased whenever she looked at his face. Suddenly, without warning, a raging desire rose within her to punch him, and indeed, she landed a direct punch to his face. Circia was shocked by her act. Unable to believe she actually hit him, she justified her act in her mind that his face simply called for a beating. Her mother and Dana screamed in a state of shock and horror at the scene. Her father and Enoch's father were in absolute shock, unable to believe what just happened. The question on their minds was, did Enoch just receive a punch from Circia? Enoch began to cry, so Circia thought for a moment he was trying to respond to her blow, but little Enoch looked at her angrily and dashed toward her quickly. Circia commented that this little one has the audacity to do that. Enoch prepared to return the blow, but Circia was faster than him. Circia easily dodged the punch, so Enoch lost his balance and fell to the ground in pain. Circia felt satisfied. Her skills as a former detective made dealing with an infant very easy for her. Silence and shock prevailed among the adults as they watched what happened. Dana hurried to carry her crying son, scolding him for his behavior with Circia. Circia commented that Enoch seems sharp-tempered for an infant. Circia began nervously, trying to convince her mother that what happened wasn't intentional. But her mother scolded her sternly, asking how she could hit Enoch and knock him to the ground. Circia claimed he fell on his own. Her mother reminded her that everyone was hoping and preparing for this meeting, and that she couldn't end it this way, ordering her to apologize to Enoch and reconcile with him immediately. Melcia turned to Dana and told her that Circia wants to apologize to Enoch. Dana replied with a laugh, saying there was no need for that. Melcia told her daughter that as an apology, she must blow on the spot of the blow to make him feel better. But Circia felt nauseous again just by looking into Enoch's eyes. Instead of blowing, Circia vomited directly onto Enoch's face. Circia realized at that moment that she might be the first woman in the continent's history to hit her fiancé and then vomit on him in their first meeting. After the disastrous meeting ended, the Emblem family returned home, where Lord Benedict helped his wife Melcia descend from the carriage. Her father noticed his wife seemed absent-minded, asking if she was okay. She answered in the affirmative while Circia babbled at her. Circia thought to herself that her mother was looking forward to this day so much, but it was ruined because of her, which made Circia feel deep guilt for disappointing her family. Suddenly, her grandfather's voice rang out calling loudly, looking for his beautiful granddaughter, which surprised her parents. The grandfather appeared running with overwhelming happiness, announcing he heard she punched that bastard from the Gray family in the face, calling her his beautiful granddaughter who is his pride and joy. Circia was shocked by this scene, wondering in amazement if this was her grandfather. It seemed every family member felt shame and frustration from Circia's actions, except for one person, her grandfather, who was proud of her, carrying her in his arms and spinning her around in extreme happiness. After some time had passed since that incident, her maid Jezia was searching for Circia in the garden, promising she would catch her. Circia saw her and wondered how she reached her so quickly. Jezia told Lady Circia that the banquet was about to begin. Jezia scolded her gently, warning her that her dress would get dirty and reminding her it was the first children's dress designed by Lady Doublier. She told her its cost was equivalent to the cost of an entire house. Cercia felt guilty and apologized, saying she just ruined a house. Jezia told her she was a professional at causing trouble, so Cercia apologized again, explaining she didn't mean it. Cercia had fled that day because she didn't want to see the face of foolish Enoch as the Grey family was visiting them. While she was hiding, she felt satisfied because she managed to escape them. She had met Enoch several times since their first meeting, and he always made her feel uncomfortable, so she hated him. Suddenly, she heard the sound of running water nearby and rejoiced because she found a stream. She was feeling very thirsty from the escape and decided to drink some water, thinking to herself that Enoch's and the family's problems are painful and wondering about the secret of his popularity among other girls. She decided to drink water and take a rest under the sun, wishing to be always free like this. But a sudden voice interrupted her, asking what she was doing here, making her jump in place and ask in panic about the identity of the speaker. The speaker was Enoch himself, whom Cercia angrily asked what he was doing here. He coldly replied he was hiding because he didn't want to see her. She angrily replied she came here for the same reason. She shouted in his face, saying he is very annoying. He calmly replied, "Look who's talking." She demanded he leave because she was here first. He replied with the same logic, saying he was here before her. Enoch concluded that based on her logic, she is the one who should leave, then lay on the grass relaxedly. Cercia was angry at his ability to argue, wondering how she could always lose in arguments before him, despite having an adult's mind. While she was looking at him angrily, she noticed something hanging at his waist. She approached him asking in amazement about this thing, and why he possessed it. Enoch asked in surprise what she was talking about, while Cercia couldn't believe what she saw. She wondered in shock if this was a real sword. He answered that the master, his grandfather, was the one who gave it to him. She asked why he wears a sword, and if he is learning swordsmanship. He answered of course he does, for he is from the Grey family and must learn it if he wants to become a knight. Then he in turn asked her if she also, as a member of the Emblem family, would learn swordsmanship, and if she hadn't started yet. Cercia admitted she was naturally interested in swords as she descends from a family of knights. She explained that their house is full of swords, but this was the first time she saw a sword up close, and she felt it was very cool and wished to have one like it, despite her annoyance that Enoch got a sword before her. But she was thinking to herself that she was exhausted from her life as a detective, and that learning swordsmanship would certainly mean her new life would be difficult and full of conflicts again. Enoch asked her again why she hadn't started yet. She answered, "It's difficult and painful and she prefers not to do it." Enoch was shocked by her answer, grabbing her and shouting how could she not learn swordsmanship. He angrily reminded her that she is the only heir of the Emblem family, and that it is her duty to learn, threatening her that if she doesn't, Cercia coldly interrupted him, warning him that she would hit him and vomit on him again if he approached closer, and asked him to stay away if he didn't want that to happen. Enoch immediately stepped away, making Cercia realize she had caused him psychological trauma, but she felt relief at the distance between them. Then he asked her again if she truly never intended to learn swordsmanship. She replied sharply that she already told him she doesn't want to. Enoch exploded, saying she would thus become boring. Cercia wondered in confusion why she would become boring. He replied with a cunning smile that she would be weak, and that the Emblem family would decline without a future knight. Cercia was shocked by his hurtful words. A raging anger took hold of her, and she shouted in his face, asking him if he was finished with his insolent talk. It was logical to be angry because of the insults he directed at her family, but what she overlooked at that moment was that Enoch, despite his maturity, was still a small child. So she punched him hard. Enoch fell to the ground under the weight of her blows, and after she hit him until he almost died, she found herself being punished by her mother, who was watching her as she carried buckets of water, saying that the beating Enoch received was much stronger than this punishment. Her mother asked if she understood her mistake. Cercia answered in the affirmative while feeling pain in her arms, thinking angrily that her mother didn't even ask why she hit him. She was thinking that that bastard was the one who started provoking her, and that his arrogant behavior called for a beating. Her mother interrupted her thoughts, asking sternly why she looks sullen and if she feels no regret at all. Before she could answer, her grandfather burst into the room asking proudly if it was true she hit that bastard from the Grey family. He carried her high, announcing that his granddaughter had achieved a glorious victory. Her mother shouted his name in despair, and he replied that their granddaughter is allowed to hit members of the Grey family from time to time. Cercia felt deeply moved. Although she knew what she did was wrong, her grandfather standing on her side unconditionally moved her feelings. She wished her mother had also asked about the reason for her act, and began to cry, raising her grandfather's concern, who asked about the reason for her crying. While wiping her tears, she told him that Enoch described her as pathetic because she refused to learn swordsmanship. She continued saying that Enoch said the Emblem family would decline, and that as a member of the family, she has her dignity that she must defend. Her grandfather laughed proudly and hugged her, saying she is indeed an honorable member of the Emblem family, and that he is proud of her, the youngest member of the Emblem family in the world. He proudly announced that thanks to her, they managed to defend their honor against that bastard from the Grey family. That night, Cercia was lying in her bed, feeling wronged because her mother didn't understand her feelings. While her arms ached from carrying the buckets, suddenly she felt movement in her room and wondered in amazement about the identity of the intruder. Cercia decided to pretend to be asleep, for she didn't want to talk to anyone at that moment. It was her mother who entered the room, whispering that her daughter was asleep. The mother sat beside her and held her arm gently, wondering if she was upset because she scolded her without asking what happened, and expressed her regret for the pain and sadness her daughter felt. She told her she heard that Dana had also scolded Enoch severely, to the point that that mature child had run away from home. While she was talking, she placed something cold on Cercia's arm, which she felt like a patch to relieve pain. The mother admitted to herself that she and Dana had gone too far in pursuit of harmony between their families, and that what happened in the end was they hurt their children. She kissed her daughter on her forehead and apologized to her, asserting she is more precious to her than anything else. She told her sleeping daughter that the reason for her anger at Enoch's words today was likely that emblem pride had begun to grow within her, the pride of strength, courage, and justice. She looked at her lovingly and said her daughter has grown a lot, and wished her a peaceful sleep. She whispered the words, "I love you," before leaving. Cercia opened her eyes after her mother left, feeling a strange sensation hearing her mother say she loves her. It was a kind and warm expression, but it triggered a profound fear within her. She remembered that her parents in her previous life weren't good people. They used to hit her, then died in an accident, and she ended up in an orphanage. But fortunately, it wasn't long before she met new adoptive parents. They promised to help her after she had suffered much, and asked her to come with them. They promised to cherish and value her. She was very happy at that time and felt a lot of hope. She believed she spent all that time alone just to be able to meet them finally. But on the night she was supposed to go to their house, she found herself before a crime scene. She saw a body being moved on a stretcher and caught a glimpse of her adoptive father's watch on the victim's wrist. She tried to enter, but the policeman prevented her, asking someone to take her out. She shouted calling for her parents, but they couldn't keep their promise. She later heard they committed suicide, but she didn't believe it. It was illogical for two people to plan suicide and at the same time plan to adopt a child, so she swore to uncover the truth. And this is the reason she never knew what parental love is. At the age she should have learned the meaning of this love, she had no parents. She was afraid that her mother in this life, being a good person, might also disappear. It was a feeling she had never experienced in her past life, to have a mother who cares for her this much. And she said she was afraid but happy, thinking she perhaps went through all that suffering, only to be reborn in this world and meet this family. She felt refreshed and vitalized. And despite her anger at Enoch, she still felt resentment, wondering who he thinks he is to call her pathetic just because he carries a wooden sword and learns a little swordsmanship. She breathed a sigh of relief and felt much better after venting her anger. Cercia heard a rustling sound, wondering if a mouse had snuck into the garden. She looked out from her balcony and saw a shadow moving in the dark garden. A figure slowly emerged under the moonlight. For some reason, she felt that this mouse looked familiar to her. The person was kneeling, pulling something out of the ground. When he saw her, he asked in surprise why she was there, and she returned the same question. Enoch answered confusedly that he was pulling out weeds. He seemed flustered as he looked at her, which piqued her curiosity. Cercia turned to leave, telling him to enjoy his time, but he called out for her to stop. She told him to say what was on his mind, informing him that the news of his escape had spread, and they would be looking for him soon. She noticed his hesitation and wondered about the reason, as it wasn't like him. Enoch admitted that he had gone too far today and offered his apology. He explained that he understood her anger at his insult to the Emblem family, and that when she said she wouldn't learn swordsmanship, he felt the urge to apologize. Cercia approached him and placed her hand on his face to check his temperature, wondering what he was doing. Enoch was startled by her movement. She said his temperature was normal, which increased his confusion and made his face flush red. He suddenly pushed her away, shouting at her to get back. Cercia told him she was only worried about him. He then apologized because he didn't mean to push her so hard. Cercia was puzzled, as he was acting very strangely today. Enoch told her to consider this a draw in exchange for her hitting him earlier. She suggested he stop apologizing and go back, reminding him that Aunt Dana would leave for Crichton tomorrow, and he wouldn't see her for a while if he didn't hurry. But Enoch replied that he didn't care. Cercia concluded that he was also angry with his mother, which is why he ran away from home, but he angrily denied it. He complained about the injustice, wondering for whom he was, learning swordsmanship, and since his mother would be gone for an entire month, how could she be angry with him on this day of all days? He sat on the ground sadly, saying it was more than he could handle. Cercia realized he was angry and sad at the same time. She approached him and asked if he was crying. He denied it and asked her to go away. She mocked him, saying he was crying just because his mother scolded him, and he exploded in anger, revealing to her that his mother had been expelled from the palace in exchange for him obtaining the engagement with her. He told her that he trains hard day and night with the sword until his palms ache, all in the hope that he can live with his mother once again. Enoch continued speaking tearfully, explaining that he cannot stop training because he must defeat someone from the Emblem family, as his grandfather promised to return his mother to the palace if he achieved this victory. Then he suddenly stood up and looked at Cercia with determination, asserting that this is the reason she must learn swordsmanship, because he must become the first member of the Grey family to win a duel against an Emblem. He pleaded with her to pick up the sword because that was the only way he could live with his mother again. In that moment, Cercia realized the reason for his intense anger when she said she wouldn't learn swordsmanship. It was the only means for him to live with Aunt Dana again. He asked if she understood his feelings now, and she denied it, but then wondered, even if she learned swordsmanship, what made him automatically assume he would be the winner? He answered with arrogance and confidence that it was obvious, for he was a genius with an innate talent for swordsmanship. He told her there was no chance for her to surpass him, as she didn't even intend to learn, and all she did was eat and play all day. Cercia fumed with rage at his insolence. She thought to herself that while she wasn't sure about his talent in swordsmanship, she was absolutely certain he had an exceptional talent for making people angry. When she raised her fist in his face, Enoch backed away in fear, asking if she was trying to turn into a monster. So Cercia told him she was only holding her temper because her mother would be angry if she hit him again. But she pointed her finger at him and warned him to wait, asserting that she would never lose to him. Unexpectedly, Enoch's eyes lit up with excitement, declaring that this was the behavior befitting true rivals. From that moment on, a fierce and bloody competition began between Cercia and Enoch. Time passed, and Cercia began her training with unparalleled seriousness. She struck the training dummy with all her might, shouting the names of her targets: head, waist, back, and neck. Her instructor, Sir Lawrence, interrupted her, pleading with a tired voice for her to stop. Cercia stopped, panting, and answered her instructor. Lawrence scolded her strictly, explaining that he asked her to practice cutting and not striking, so she asked innocently if there was a difference between the two. Lawrence felt despair, realizing she truly carried Emblem blood, for she would ignite with rage at the mere mention of the name Grey. He looked at her seriously and asked if she truly wished to defeat someone from the Grey family. She answered with enthusiasm and confidence that she certainly wanted to, even wanting to crush Enoch with her sword. The instructor warned her that if she continued waving her sword in such a random way, she would inevitably lose, which terrified Cercia, as defeat was the last thing she could accept. The instructor shouted at her, ordering her to run 5 additional laps around the training field, and she tearfully agreed. She hated the idea of losing to Enoch, that fool who ignored her and spoke ill of her, more than she hated death itself. All she truly wanted was to beat him soundly. But because they both hailed from 2 ancient families, people looked at this competition in completely different ways. Her parents felt anxious about this intense rivalry. As for her grandfather, he saw this conflict as a certain victory over the Grey family, proudly declaring that victory would undoubtedly belong to his granddaughter. Soon it became the talk of the town, as rumors spread that Cercia Emblem had challenged a member of the Grey family to a duel, with people wondering about the truth of the reconciliation said to have taken place between the 2 families. The rumors evolved to say that Cercia and Enoch were competing for the position of the next Imperial Protection Knight, and that the Emblem family would never concede this honor to the Grey family. People celebrated this renewed conflict as if it were a festival, and so their rivalry turned into material for entertainment and gossip enjoyed by everyone, while the Emperor listened to everything from afar. Emperor Marcian Leopoldo Rotinas was watching the events from his throne with interest. He had received news stating that Cercia Emblem had already begun learning swordsmanship. One of his advisors confirmed the news, explaining that the rivalry between the Emblem and Grey families had ignited once again, to which the Emperor commented that a long time had passed since something entertaining had appeared for his subjects. Based on that, the Emperor decided that both Cercia and Enoch should participate in the upcoming hunting competition, which shocked his advisor, who reminded him they were still children of only 7 years of age. The advisor tried to dissuade the Emperor from his decision, pointing out that sending them to the Metro Forest was extremely dangerous. But the Emperor cut him off with a sharp look, coldly asking since when he needed anyone's permission. The advisor realized his mistake and hurried to kneel, apologizing for overstepping his bounds. The Emperor accepted his apology and then ordered him to go and bring a certain person immediately. The advisor asked nervously about the identity of the person intended. The Emperor explained that since the Grey and Emblem families were fighting fiercely to determine who would become the next Imperial Protection Knight, it was duty-bound to give them a chance to meet the Crown Prince, who must also be feeling curious. The Emperor commented that the young Crown Prince was interested in knowing which of them, between Emblem and Grey, would become the most loyal sword to him in the future, and he was also wondering which of them would be the first to sacrifice. their life for him. Meanwhile, Lady Melcia, Cercia's mother, was expressing her concern to her father, wondering if all this hard training was truly necessary. The grandfather dismissed her fears, asserting that Cercia was fine, while her mother commented that Cercia was still 7 years old and might suffer an injury due to overtraining. The grandfather reassured her that the blood of the Emblem family was not that fragile, and that his granddaughter's true motivation was her wild desire to win, which surpassed mere hard work. Melcia told him worriedly that there was someone who continued to provide Cercia with news of Enoch, making her always determined to surpass him no matter the cost. She wondered angrily about the identity of this person doing so, threatening them, while her grandfather sipped his tea pretending to be ignorant. A few days ago, Cercia's instructor, Lawrence, was urging her to run an extra lap, asserting that exhaustion was just an illusion and that she should not fear muscle loss. He was encouraging her to enjoy the pain, as it was the only evidence of progress and growth. In that moment, the grandfather whispered in the instructor's ear, telling him that Enoch had run 10 laps and mastered the horizontal strike, wondering about Cercia's progress. The instructor's enthusiasm ignited, and he shouted at Cercia that Enoch had run 10 full laps. Cercia exploded with anger at the mention of Enoch's name, shouting his name as she gathered all her remaining energy. Returning to the present, the grandfather asked permission to leave under the pretext of urgent work, so Melcia asked him to bring some water for her daughter before he left, and he agreed to her request. But the butler interrupted them, so the grandfather seized the opportunity and rushed out. The mother asked the butler what he wanted. The butler told her that a letter had arrived from the Imperial Palace, an invitation to attend the upcoming hunting competition. Melcia was surprised, explaining that they had already received their invitation, but the butler explained that he brought this invitation to her first. He revealed to her that this invitation was not addressed to her, but was addressed directly to Lady Cercia Emblem. Shock took hold of Melcia as she wondered about the meaning of inviting her daughter to the Imperial hunting competition, and then the butler told her that he saw the envoys heading toward the Grey family lands after delivering the letter. Melcia immediately realized that Enoch must have received a similar invitation, which the butler also suggested. Anxiety took hold of her, and she wondered what the Emperor was thinking, realizing there was some reason behind placing these two children against each other. She concluded that the Emperor must be displeased with the state of harmony between their families, but she couldn't understand why he resorted to such an extreme step as inviting them to a hunting competition. Melcia was thinking anxiously about sending her daughter to the Metro Forest, inhabited by monsters. Despite her bad feeling that something terrible was about to happen, her grandfather was outside happily playing with his granddaughter, Cercia. Laughter filled the place, and happiness was evident on the child. The family arrived in their luxurious carriage at the lands of Count Condrius, where the competition would be held. Cercia's father, Benedict, tried to reassure his worried wife, asserting that the Emperor wouldn't send their child to a dangerous place, and that the monsters in that forest were low level, and that the area designated for Cercia had been fully secured. Then he looked at their daughter from the carriage window and asked his wife to trust their daughter's abilities. Meanwhile, a group of young girls were crying bitterly, expressing their hatred for Cercia for being mean and their desire to go to the hunting competition with Enoch, with one even wondering why Cercia didn't simply give up her marriage to him. Cercia felt extremely annoyed while covering her ears, pleading for them to be quiet, and then told them sharply that if they truly wanted to see Enoch, they could participate in the competition themselves. One of the girls screamed that she didn't want that. All she wanted was to marry Enoch, and that it was unfair that Cercia was the only one who had this opportunity. Cercia exploded in anger and asked them if they truly thought she was doing all this because she wanted to marry Enoch, asserting that a small child like him was not her taste at all. Then she declared loudly that she would rather marry her father than marry him, which left the girls in astonishment and silence. The girls wondered in confusion about her father, so Cercia told them that if they saw him, they would realize Enoch was nothing in comparison, and asked them to look behind them. The girls turned to see her father's shadow from afar. When Lord Benedict appeared in all his elegance and handsomeness, smiling kindly, the girls were completely mesmerized. Shock and intense admiration took hold of them, and they couldn't hide their amazement at his beauty. The girls began bothering Cercia with questions about her father, with one even declaring she wanted to marry him, prompting Cercia to shout at them again to leave her alone. Finally, they reached the great banquet hall. Cercia looked out the carriage window in amazement. She hadn't expected the hunting competition to be this luxurious, and the place was teeming with nobles. Inside, the guests were whispering as the Duke of Grey's family arrived. One lady expressed great excitement to see them, asserting that she had been waiting for this day impatiently and must go to exchange words with them. Duke Jed Grey entered with his grandson Enoch and reminded his grandson that all the nobles were watching him, and that he must prove his worth in this competition no matter the cost. He ordered him to prove to everyone that he was superior to the Emblem family. Enoch answered seriously and respectfully that he understood, calling him my lord. But the Duke reminded him in a gentler tone that he asked him to call him grandfather. and Enoch immediately complied. The grandfather asked him to go and greet the other families, so Enoch wondered if Circia had not arrived yet. He thought to himself that if the nation's heroine had arrived, the hall would be louder, and he confidently assured himself that she couldn't be better than him, and that it was impossible to lose to her. He was convinced that his victory was a fact that wouldn't change. Meanwhile, in another room, the maid Josiah was telling Circia, who was sitting exhausted, that she would put her luggage aside. Circia thanked her, and then Josiah remembered something. Josiah told her that her parents were having dinner with Count and Countess Condrias, and that they asked her to have her dinner alone and go to bed, which shocked Circia. Circia asked in shock what the maid meant, and how she wouldn't be able to see her parents on this day of all days. But Josiah simply asked her to spend some quiet time alone. Then the maid left in a hurry, leaving Circia alone, still in a state of bewilderment. Circia looked at the closed door, wondering if Josiah had truly left, and felt surprised that everyone, even her close maid, had left her alone on this specific day. Shock took hold of her, and her eyes teared up when she suddenly realized today was her 7th birthday. And this was not at all the proper way to celebrate it. She thought to herself that she had completely forgotten her previous life as a woman of 32, and wondered if the reason for that was because eating with her parents on her birthday had become something natural and expected for her. A feeling of injustice overwhelmed her, and she felt that leaving her alone on such a day was extremely cruel. True sadness took hold of her, and tears began to gather in her eyes as she wondered about the reason for this deep feeling, whether it was due to her exhaustion from the children's harassment in the carriage, or if her sadness was genuine. She decided she might feel better after some sleep, and determined to spend a great day in her own way, then lay down in her bed. As she was dozing off, the door opened quietly, and Jessie peered through, seeing her mistress asleep and noting sadly that she had been crying. The maid whispered to the sleeping Circia not to worry. Then she touched her hair gently and promised her that her day would be wonderful. But after moments, Jessie suddenly woke her mistress, shaking her strongly and asking her to get up quickly, which confused the sleepy Circia. Jessie covered Circia's eyes with a blindfold, making Circia ask in confusion what was happening. The maid ordered her not to remove the blindfold and just to follow her. As she led her, Circia wondered about the reason for all this mystery, so Jessie told her she would understand everything when they arrived. Circia began to grumble that she had many tasks today, and that she was planning to change her clothes and check the banquet hall, but Jessie gently silenced her, and Circia gave in. As she walked blindfolded, she was thinking that she didn't want a gift. All she wanted was to spend some time with her parents, and that she wished to forget about the hunting competition and get some rest. At which point Jessie told her they had arrived and she would remove the blindfold now. As soon as the blindfold was removed, Circia found herself in the middle of a surprise celebration, with colored confetti flying all around her. Her father stood before her smiling, carrying a large box, wishing her a happy birthday. Amazement took hold of her as she asked what was happening, so her father told her it was difficult to keep it a secret, because they wanted to surprise her, and encouraged her to open her gift. Tears flooded her eyes, and she realized in that moment that she knew nothing about this surprise, and felt reassured because her parents never forgot her birthday. She wondered enthusiastically what this surprise gift could be as she lifted the heavy lid of the box. Her eyes widened in absolute shock as she looked at the contents of the box. The gift was a magnificent longsword, carefully placed on a red satin cushion. Engraved on its blade was the phrase, "To Circia, emblem our pride, with all our love." She looked at her father in a state of bewilderment, and he asked her with a smile if she liked the gift. Circia remembered how she used to grumble in the past that Enoch was using a real sword, while her father told her she still lacked sufficient strength and might get hurt. She had protested angrily at that time, saying it wasn't fair, and she needed to defeat Enoch soon. Returning to the present, she looked at the sword with deep emotion, realizing her father had remembered her persistence, and felt extreme happiness because he made it for her himself. Then her father presented her with another gift, the official Emblem Knight uniform, announcing she had now become an official knight of the Emblem Knights. Circia tried on the jacket and thanked her father warmly, asserting this was the best gift she had ever received, but her father told her it was still too early to celebrate. Circia heard a familiar voice calling her from afar, and when she turned, she found her mother standing before her, surrounded by the Emblem Knights. Her mother stepped forward, also wearing the official knight uniform, and asked her to approach, then announced that in celebration of her official joining of the Knights, she would be the first opponent to duel her. Circia asked eagerly if this meant she finally recognized her as a knight, and her mother answered in the affirmative. With a confident smile, her mother drew her sword, asserting to her daughter that she would not go easy on her in this duel. Circia's eyes filled with tears, whispering that her mother was the best, then added with a cunning smile that she had trained a lot herself. Circia raised her new sword with enthusiasm and shouted at her mother to get ready. The mother accepted the challenge with a smile and asked her daughter to show her everything she had. With a swift strike, the mother lunged at her daughter. The strike was so strong that Circia flew through the air. Her mother looked to the sky in amazement, mockingly commenting that her daughter could fly, while her father watched the scene in shock. The mother laughed, admitting she might not have controlled her strength well, and immediately ordered the knights to search for Circia. While Circia was lying somewhere in the forest, wishing she had asked her mother to go a bit easy on her. Later that day in the banquet hall, Circia noticed the overwhelming popularity her mother enjoyed, as nobles gathered around her to offer greetings. Her father pointed to this scene and told her that one day when she becomes the commander of the Emblem Knights, she will be in the same position as her mother, which made Circia doubt it. She thought to herself that it was impossible to become like her mother, and admitted she had realized a bitter truth the moment she began learning swordsmanship. For when she compared her progress with the news reaching her about Enoch's achievements, she felt she simply didn't have enough talent. This was the reason for her feeling of anxiety and unease throughout her journey to the hunting competition, as a sense took hold of her that she would inevitably lose to Enoch. She remembered she only started learning swordsmanship with one goal, which was to crush that annoying boy. But she wondered if all this had meaning if she ended up defeated. Then a troubling thought crossed her mind. If she lost to Enoch, would she give up carrying the sword entirely? This thought made her feel empty and disappointed for a reason she didn't understand. Her thoughts were interrupted by the voices of girls calling Lord Grey, and she saw Enoch surrounded by female admirers. The girls were competing for his attention. Some asked him to have sweets with them, and some wished to dance with him. But he apologized to them politely, explaining he was grateful for their invitation but must stay by his grandfather's side on that day, and promised them another chance later. Circia was watching him from afar, feeling resentment, wondering why he spoke in such a condescending way like he was an adult. He was extremely annoying in her eyes. In that moment, their eyes met across the hall, and they exchanged sharp looks full of challenge. Circia wondered to herself why he was staring at her. Suddenly, the herald's voice rang out, announcing the arrival of His Majesty the Emperor and His Highness the Crown Prince, which surprised Circia. The Emperor entered the hall accompanied by the young Crown Prince, and everyone bowed in respect and cheered in welcome. Circia's father carried his daughter in his arms, and she was dazzled by the majestic appearance of the Emperor, while someone whispered that the Crown Prince shouldn't be in such a place. Circia asked him about the strangeness of the atmosphere, and if the Crown Prince wasn't supposed to attend, so her father explained his health had been very weak since childhood. He told her he had survived death several times, which made everyone feel anxious about him. Circia looked at the young prince and felt sorry he was so sick he couldn't even leave the palace at such a young age. While Circia was contemplating the Crown Prince, the prince waved his hand at her. She felt surprised, wondering if he truly looked at her, and it seemed to her that despite his weakness, he was a kind-hearted person. She asked her father if the Archbishop could heal the Crown Prince with his holy powers. Her father answered that even if the Archbishop could heal his body, he couldn't get rid of the people who make his life in constant danger. Curiosity took hold of her, and she asked about the meaning of his words. But her father told her she was still too young to understand these matters, and that they were affairs of adults. Circia understood, but felt sad because the young prince faces such danger at an early age. She had learned that the greatest honor for a knight is to become someone's sword, and with her current skills, it seemed to her that Enoch was the closest to winning the honor of protecting the Crown Prince. But she resolved to do her best until the end, to become the sword capable of protecting the prince. Meanwhile, the Emperor was exchanging greetings with those present who praised today's banquet. Duke Jed Grey stepped forward, and the Emperor told him he had heard rumors about his grandson. He asked if what was said about his exceptional talent was true, so the Duke laughed, answering that the Emperor was flattering him, and asked him to allow him to present him officially. Enoch bowed before the Emperor and introduced himself, to which the Emperor commented that he already looks like a promising talent, and that he should get along well with the Crown Prince. Then the Crown Prince introduced Enoch as the future leader of the Grey family, and the prince welcomed him warmly. The Emperor announced he was going to enjoy the banquet, and asked Enoch to spend some time with the Crown Prince, and Duke Jed immediately agreed. The Emperor whispered to the Duke that it would be better for the Crown Prince when he ascends the throne to have a close friend by his side, especially if this friend was a knight of the Imperial Guard. The Duke understood the message, and the Emperor left the matter in his hands. Doubt took hold of the Duke, wondering if the Emperor was thinking of supporting the Grey family to take over the position of Imperial Guard, but he found this overt support suspicious. For the position of Imperial Guard had always belonged to the Emblem family, even when the two families were at the peak of their rivalry. But he realized the situation this time was different, as the gap in skills between Enoch and Circia was large. The Duke felt his genius grandson might finally be able to achieve the hope the Grey family had long carried. In that moment, Benedict welcomed the Crown Prince, expressing his happiness to meet him after a long time. Lord Benedict arrived with his daughter, Circia. Circia stepped forward and bowed before the Crown Prince, introducing herself proudly as Circia Emblem. The Crown Prince's face lit up upon seeing her, calling her by name and expressing how happy he was to meet her. Telling her he had been waiting for her impatiently, the prince brought out a book enthusiastically and asked her if she knew how much he longed to talk about this book with someone of her age from the Emblem family. He asked if she had read the book The Emperor's Sword, which recounts the story of the founding emperor with the first lord of the Emblem family, explaining it was one of the mandatory books for all children of Rotinas. As soon as he confirmed she had read it, the prince began showcasing his information with great enthusiasm. Suddenly, the prince suffered a coughing fit, and blood came out of his mouth, which shocked Circia. Everyone rushed to him in concern, but he reassured them he was fine, and that his excitement had increased slightly because he reads the book with great passion. Enoch's grandfather suggested he return early to rest, while Benedict offered to summon the priest. The prince tried to downplay the matter, asserting he was fine and that this always happens, but added he must return now. But he looked at Circia with pleading eyes, expressing his desire to stay a bit longer, so Circia understood from his looks that he was begging her. Benedict suggested to the crown prince to rest today and visit their estate at another time, and the prince rejoiced at this suggestion greatly. Circia felt pity for him, for he was on the verge of death because of his illness, and couldn't even play outside freely. Driven by sympathy, she told him that when he comes to visit them, she, as the heir of the Emblem family, would show him the sword of the founding lord mentioned in the book, The Emperor's Sword. The crown prince was deeply impressed by this offer and felt extreme happiness. Circia bid the prince farewell, wishing him rest and a speedy recovery, and promised him she looked forward to seeing him again, so he smiled at her and waved goodbye. Then Lord Grey turned to the crown prince and wished him an enjoyable banquet as well. Duke Jed Grey looked at Circia's father with admiration, commenting on his skill in inviting the crown prince to their estate so easily, then announced he would accompany his highness to the priest. The duke asked his grandson Enoch to follow him, but Enoch was feeling a strange discomfort. Despite clearly excelling over Circia, he felt a vague sensation that he would be defeated by her. The next morning at the entrance of the Metro Forest, the herald stood before the participants. He announced loudly that this place is a fierce battlefield for young nobles, and an opportunity for them to carve their way as knights of the Rotina's empire. Then he announced the start of the hunting competition in the Metro Forest, which attracted the attention of many Night Squad commanders. Before the competition started, Circia's mother was reminding her of the most important advice. She reminded her never to lose sight of her prey and to watch it until the end, then asked her about her strength. Circia wondered in confusion about her strength, so her mother answered she would know it at the right time as long as she didn't lose sight of her goal. Her father interrupted them, telling his wife that the time had come for Circia's departure, and tried to reassure her their daughter would be fine. He assured her that the youth area wouldn't have any monsters released in it, and that Circia would only face small herbivores. But the mother remained worried, so Circia reassured her she was strong and there was no need for concern. In that moment, the herald called all youth section knights to gather, so Circia launched with enthusiasm. Her mother shouted at her from afar that defeat is better than getting hurt, but she replied with a no, and promised in her heart that she would remember what she said. She scolded herself internally because what she said was exactly the opposite of what she meant. She believed this was her only chance to defeat Enoch, and that she must face him before he grew stronger. Otherwise, she would never have another chance to win. She resolved to hunt more than Enoch no matter what, and rushed quickly into the forest. When she arrived, she found Enoch had already preceded her accompanied by 2 other young men. Circia stepped forward to introduce herself, and the 2 young men welcomed her in confusion. Circia wondered in amazement if the competition had already started, and asked about Enoch's location, but she was shocked when she realized Enoch had already vanished, and that he launched without saying a single word. Anger took hold of her, and she shouted that she would never lose. Meanwhile, the 2 young men were whispering that one of them intended to withdraw, and that they should wait for him to return, then tell him their decision. They believed that Circia, like the rest of the nobles, didn't care about them, and that this battle was a losing one for them anyway. While they were talking, Circia approached them, asking what they were doing. Circia asked the 2 young men why they weren't hunting, warning them they would lose if they continued like this. So they told her Enoch's and Circia's prey were scattered everywhere, and they were cleaning them up. Circia was surprised and thanked them, but pointed out they would also lose if they continued doing that, and offered to take over herself and ask them to go hunting. The 2 young men refused her offer, asserting they were fine, and that their winning or losing would only lead to trouble. In the end, no one cares about low-ranking nobles. Then one of them revealed his father ordered him to surrender if he was in a team with someone from the Emblem or Grey family, which shocked Circia, who wondered about the reason. The young man explained that if they won, they would be considered traitors because they ruined the anticipated confrontation between Emblem and Grey, and if they lost. That was expected anyway, so whatever they tried, it wouldn't change anything. Circia gripped her sword, realizing their fate had been decided the moment their team was formed, but she exploded with anger and shouted in their faces that they were wrong about everything. The 2 young men looked at her in amazement, not understanding what she meant. Circia challenged them, saying if they could defeat her here, she would show them what would actually happen. She told them with a cunning smile that this opportunity is like a lottery, and asked them to listen carefully. The 2 young men wondered in confusion about the meaning of the word lottery. Circia told them they think they will become traitors if they win, but that is not true at all. She acknowledged there were many nobles who came to watch the conflict between her family and Enoch's, for they were of the largest families in the country. She likened the matter to 2 large houses burning and wondered how much pleasure people would feel watching this scene. Then she posed a hypothetical question to them. If the house next to the first fire ignited with a brighter flame, would people truly complain that they couldn't see the original fire and curse them as traitors? Or would they enjoy the scene of the new, more exciting fire? Then she revealed to them the true prize. If one of them managed to defeat her or Enoch here, then both the Emblem Knight Squad and the Grey Knight Squad would try to recruit them, because they would have defeated the genius Circia and the miracle Enoch, and asked them if they understood what she meant. As she was urging them to get up and launch, Enoch suddenly appeared carrying his prey. Enoch mockingly repeated her words, the genius Circia and the miracle Enoch. Circia was flustered and asked when he arrived. Enoch told her his grandfather always used to say that birth, family, appearance and eloquence, and even winning and losing, all that doesn't matter, for a true knight speaks with his sword only. Then asked them if they had spoken with their swords today. The two young men answered they hadn't said anything yet. One of them tried to justify his position, explaining not everyone has a strong heart like them. The young man thought to himself that this was his way of survival. In that moment, Circia looked at the blonde young man and noticed his face looked familiar, remembering Olivia Blodmore, and asked him if he was her brother. The young man was surprised and asked her how she knew his sister. Circia remembered Olivia's annoying voice in the carriage, and realized she would never forget that voice and those eyes. Circia ignored the matter, and told the young man his sister said his eternal dream was to join the Emblem Knights, which surprised him. Circia offered to give the blonde young man a hint to win her mother's favor, the commander of the Emblem Knights, so he asked her confusedly about this hint. She told him with a wide smile that her mother loves rebels, those who resist until the end, even if they are going to lose. The young man was shocked by this advice, then pointed to his friend Emmett with enthusiasm, announcing they have no time to waste, and that they will show them a fire show befitting young nobles. Enoch drew his sword and told the two young men that since their starting point was different, he and Circia would give them a 30-minute grace period and ask them to go hunting while they waited. Circia accused him that he only wants to use this time to rest because he's tired, so Enoch ordered her to be quiet. After a spirit of challenge ignited in them, the two young men announced they wouldn't refuse the offer and that they would show their skills. The two young men launched into the forest, screaming with enthusiasm they would sweep everything. Circia was watching them as they ran, thinking to herself they were cute, but Enoch called her name. He asked her if he had told her before that if he won in this competition, he would be able to live with his mother. Circia rejoiced greatly at this news, and Enoch commented she seemed happier than him. She told Enoch it was good news. Then Enoch asked her if she would go easy on him so he could win. Circia's features completely changed, and she asked him how he dared ask that, asserting she would crush him. Enoch smiled, saying this is better, for that is her true personality, and that is the reason that drove him to tell her. Then he suddenly noticed she no longer felt nauseous when they were close to each other, which surprised Circia, who realized he was right. She remembered how looking into Enoch's eyes used to make her nauseous, but now she found them beautiful, even strange and familiar at the same time. As she approached him to examine his eyes closely, Enoch shouted at her, warning her she was too close, so she backed away in confusion and apologized. Suddenly, a young girl appeared screaming at them not to marry, which left them in amazement. It was Olivia, the blonde young man's sister. Olivia confronted Circia angrily, describing her as a liar because she said she would marry her father and not Enoch. So Circia wondered how she managed to enter here. Olivia continued her screaming, reminding her of her promise to marry her father. Circia gripped her head in frustration, wondering if this girl was a dolphin because of her sharp screaming. Circia scolded her angrily and asked her how she entered this dangerous place. Olivia was surprised at her anger, saying she heard the youth area was safe and had no monsters. Enoch explained to her that there are wild animals and that entering without a sword is dangerous, and for that reason, entry is restricted to participants only. He added that this competition is held under the auspices of the Emperor, and that she must explain how she entered. Otherwise, her family, Blodmore, will bear responsibility. Terror took hold of Olivia at the mention of her parents, and she admitted she came because her brother was in the same group as Enoch, and she wanted to see him. She pleaded with them not to tell her parents, so Enoch told her her brother would arrive soon, and they had no choice but to take her out. Circia explained to Enoch that the consequences would be dire. They might settle for scolding them, but if another noble caused a scandal in a competition of this size, their future would end. Olivia cried, saying her brother had worked hard, so Circia wondered angrily about who was at fault in all. Circia began thinking of a solution to this dilemma. She had to find a way to get Olivia out of the forest safely, while maintaining the honor of Sir Osric, who had just taken his first step as a knight. Circia was thinking deeply, trying to find a way to solve this problem while maintaining a chance to win her confrontation against Enoch. Meanwhile, in the Emperor's tent, a guard was receiving direct orders from His Majesty. The Crown Prince noticed a mysterious smile on his father, the Emperor's face, and asked him about its cause. The Emperor replied that he was looking forward to seeing who would win this competition and asked the Crown Prince for his prediction. The Crown Prince explained that he always roots for the Emblem family, but he believed that Grey might win this time. The prince justified his opinion by saying that the Emblem family, as he read in the book The Emperor's Sword, is characterized by strength. But when it comes to protecting the weak, they do not care about winning winning or losing. Then he revealed to his father that he saw a little girl following Circia into the forest. He concluded that if Circia were forced to protect that girl, she would likely lose the match against Grey. This news piqued the Emperor's interest, who thought that the presence of this little girl might make the story more interesting. Back in the forest, Circia was still wondering how she could solve this situation and defeat Enoch at the same time. She felt frustrated because all her hard work was about to go to waste, and she thought for a moment about telling Osric to take his sister and leave, not caring what might happen to him. But she backed away from this selfish idea, realizing that Olivia was ultimately the one at fault. After deep thought, she sighed and gave in, deciding to withdraw from the competition, as this was the only solution available to her. Enoch was shocked by her sudden decision. Circia explained to him that if she returned Olivia herself, Osric would not get into trouble. So Olivia looked at her with gratitude. Circia told Olivia that she would take her to the exit, and Olivia wondered if she could really do that after all the effort she had put into preparing for the competition. Circia admitted it was unfortunate, but she did not want to achieve victory at the cost of ignoring someone else in trouble. Then she added that the Emblem family's motto is to protect the weak, and that she would likely be kicked out of the house if she left them here for the sake of winning, which left Enoch in absolute awe. Circia asked Olivia to promise her not to throw a tantrum about Enoch again, so Olivia apologized and promised her that. But Enoch interrupted her, asking anxiously about his fate if she withdrew. Circia reminded him that he must complete the competition, but Enoch offered her help. Circia explained to him that all eyes were on them in this competition, and that if they were caught moving together, they would have no excuse. Then she looked at him seriously and reminded him that he had a compelling reason to win, and Enoch acknowledged that. He was doing all of this for his mother, whom he had waited for so long. Circia placed her hand on Olivia's shoulder and ordered Enoch to go and win, warning him that he would be a major source of embarrassment if he did not do it now. Enoch looked at them, thinking that Circia certainly had her own reasons for wanting to win as well. Circia reassured Olivia that she would get her home safely. As they were walking, Circia noticed that Olivia suddenly shivered and asked her why, and Olivia pointed with a trembling hand toward the darkness in front of them. A massive creature with sharp fangs branching, horns and glowing red eyes emerged from among the trees. Terror gripped Circia as she realized this was a monster, a giant horned wild boar. She wondered in shock how a low-rank monster could be here, after they were told that all monsters had been removed from the youth area. Circia told Olivia not to move from behind her, and remembered what she had learned from her mother about the monsters in this world. She knew that these monsters usually reside in Crichton, but they sometimes come down to human settlements driven by their uncontrollable desire to kill them. At that moment, Enoch suddenly appeared and told Circia that this was a low-rank monster, and she replied that she knew that. But she felt terrified. No matter how brilliant Enoch was, facing a monster like this was beyond their abilities. In fact, it was impossible for her. Circia realized that if she did not stop the monster here, not only would Olivia be in danger, but Emmett and Osric would also be in danger when they returned. She resolved to fight and gripped her sword tightly, remembering the words engraved on it. To Circia, Emblem, our pride with all our love. She remembered her father and realized she was the daughter he was proud of. As a member of the Emblem family, she had to be a proud knight who protects the weak. She prepared to fight and asked herself about the most important advice her mother had given her. The advice was to never lose sight of her prey and to watch it until the end. Then she remembered her mother's question about her strength and realized that the answer lay in the thing she had practiced hundreds of times. It was the movement her body remembered, even if her mind strayed. She lunged at the monster, shouting, delivering a powerful blow that caused a deep wound. The monster screamed in pain, so Circia called out to Enoch. She shouted at him to finish it now. Enoch lunged quickly toward the monster. He delivered a fatal blow that caused the monster to explode. Enoch wondered, panting, if they had succeeded in eliminating it. Circia fell to her knees in exhaustion, covered in blood. Enoch looked at her with concern and rebuked himself because he had stood frozen in place like a fool. It was the worst moment of his life. While Enoch was engulfed in guilt, Circia shouted at him to cut off the monster's breath as it was still alive. At her cry, Enoch's frozen legs moved on their own. He lunged at the monster again, realizing that she had awakened him from his paralysis and directed him toward the creature's weakness. He looked at his blood-stained sword and admitted to himself that this was his complete defeat before her. Olivia wondered fearfully if everything was over. Olivia rushed to Circia, shouting her name, and Circia reassured her that she was still alive. Olivia thanked her tearfully for saving her, and that she survived thanks to her. Circia smiled, saying she was happy she was safe. Suddenly, Circia heard a rustling sound and asked warily about the identity of the newcomer, and a familiar voice answered her. It was Osric and Emmett returning from the hunt, and Osric was surprised to see his sister Olivia there, wondering why she was there and about all this blood. The two young men were shocked to see the monster's corpse lying on the ground, and one of them wondered if Enoch was the one who killed the monster. Enoch tried to give credit to Circia, but Circia called out to Osric, telling him that chaos was about to begin since Enoch was the one who caught the monster. She asked him to take advantage of everyone's preoccupation and leave with Olivia quickly without anyone noticing them, which left Osric in total confusion. She told him that she would explain everything to him later and that they must hurry, so Osric agreed and took his sister with him. At that moment, Emmett appeared, telling her that he would come with them to help them leave safely. So Circia asked him to take care of them. Circia sighed, thinking about how eventful this day had been, and then Enoch called her name. She checked on him, but he asked her sharply why she lied, but she did not understand what he meant. Enoch accused Circia of pretending to be stupid. She shouted at him while pointing at him, asserting she was sure of what she saw. She covered her mouth in shock, wondering in horror why the face of that bastard from her previous life overlapped with Enoch's face. She remembered the man who was the right hand of her parents' killer, who had also killed her. He was responsible for managing her enemy's money and planning his political strategies. She remembered her last meeting with him, where he mocked her for being late again, and he asked her if she had come specifically to see him. It was her archenemy, Yoon Do-yeon. Back in the present, Circia felt nauseous and asked Enoch not to come near her. She wondered in confusion what had just happened and why that man's face overlapped with Enoch's. Enoch asked her if she was okay and attributed what happened to the monster's blood. She stepped away from him, thinking that perhaps the similarity in hair color was the reason and that the nausea had stopped. She told herself it was strange. Enoch and that man were completely different, for Yoon Do-yeon was a scoundrel. As for Enoch, he was a bit rude, but he was not a bad person. Enoch told her that everything was fine now. Enoch grabbed his sword and told her that he was the one who should do it, so she asked him what he meant. Enoch challenged Circia to a real duel. Circia was shocked by his request and wondered why he wanted to duel now. He explained to her that she was the one who killed the monster, but she lied to Osric and said he was the one who did it, so he wanted to settle the matter between them with the sword to see who was truly stronger. Circia was surprised by his words, assuring him that he was the one who finished off the monster, and that this was her nature as Circia emblem. Enoch replied that he found no pleasure in a victory given to him as a concession. Circia exploded in anger and asked him mockingly who was conceding to whom, and if he thought she called him over because she didn't want to finish off the monster herself, asserting she wanted to kill it with her own hands as well. Circia continued her conversation with Enoch, explaining that she called him over because she dropped her sword, calling him a fool, and she told Enoch that this meant he was the one who killed the monster, and if he hadn't, she would have met her end. Then Enoch noticed that her palm was completely torn, but Circia angrily warned him not to think he had crushed her in a landslide victory. She pointed to the pile of prey she had caught, asserting that this did not mean her total defeat. She promised him that there would be many opportunities to crush him in the future. Enoch understood from her words that she intended to continue learning swordsmanship. Circia admitted that she didn't like a single thing about him from his head to his toes, but she was grateful to him because he taught her swordsmanship. Circia remembered the moment she saw Olivia's terrified eyes, and how that brought back the memory of why she became a detective in her previous life. She remembered the victim's parents thanking her tearfully, asserting that their daughter would rest in peace, thanks to her. Of course, her primary motivation was to catch her parents' killer, but the idea that she could be useful to someone, and that she could be the reason for someone's salvation, filled her with great joy, for she had managed to protect someone with her own hands. The instinctive feeling of pushing her sword toward the monster's weakness was exciting in a way she would never forget. She realized in that moment that she wanted to learn more about swordsmanship, and that she loved the sword very much. Enoch noticed her happiness and commented that she truly seemed happy learning the sword. At that moment, Enoch returned to the celebration arena, where everyone welcomed him with cheers and applause. News spread quickly that he had eliminated a monster at such a young age, and that a genius had finally emerged from the Grey family to surpass the emblem. People gathered around Duke Jed Grey to congratulate him, and he proudly announced that this child was the starting shot for the history that the Grey family would write from now on. A history that would turn into a legend, where his grandson would be the first member of the Grey family to serve the crown prince. The emperor watched the scene from his throne smiling, while the duke bowed to him in respect. The emperor mockingly commented that Duke Jed Grey was truly terrifying, and that he had already noticed the chessboard he had prepared for him. Then he wondered with a cunning smile if things were not going exactly as he wished. For by Enoch winning the hunting competition, the Duke now had the justification to make Grey the next Imperial Guard. The Emperor wondered if the Duke had to respond to the steps he wanted. He ended his speech with a malicious question, wondering if his master would do it for him. Elsewhere, Circia's mother and father were waiting for her return anxiously. A lady called out to Circia's mother, "Lady Emblem." It was the Marchioness of Bloodmore with her daughter Olivia, and she had come to tell her something. The Marchioness bowed before Lady Melcia and pleaded for her to forgive her, apologizing profusely, which surprised Melcia, who asked her to raise her head. The Marchioness of Bloodmore told Lady Melcia that her daughter Olivia had explained everything to her, and that she had secretly followed Circia into the forest. Then she revealed to her that Circia had saved her daughter from a monster, which surprised Melcia. Olivia interrupted her mother to reassure Lady Melcia that Circia had only suffered a minor wound on her palm, but she was fine. Olivia admitted she was sorry for her reckless behavior, which only brought trouble to others, and that everything that happened was her fault. Lady Melcia smiled and told her that it was a great honor for an Emblem Knight to protect Lady Bloodmore. This noble response impressed Olivia and her mother. Melcia sat before Olivia and asked her not to blame herself, for everything Emblem did was right. Then she called for her husband and told him they would be leaving now. The Marchioness remarked to her daughter that Lady Melcia was truly a wonderful person, and Olivia agreed, saying she was very wonderful. Cercia's father pointed to somewhere in the forest. Melcia saw her daughter emerging from among the trees. The parents called out for their daughter anxiously. Cercia ran toward them, shouting that she had returned, and hugged them with overwhelming happiness. Her father welcomed her and asked if she had enjoyed her time, and she answered with enthusiasm. Cercia told her mother that she had something important to tell her. She announced with overwhelming happiness that she thought she had fallen in love with the sword, which surprised her parents. She gave a wide smile. Her parents hugged her lovingly and told her that was enough, for that was all that mattered. Elsewhere, Enoch was training hard, where his instructor warned him that if he were late by even a single second, his head would be cut off. The instructor reminded him that there is no time for thinking in real battles, and that swordsmanship must be learned with the body, not the mind. Enoch realized this, but he was still having difficulty applying it. He continued hard training until he was able to break his instructor's sword. His instructor praised him, announcing that he deserved the title of the youngest winner of the hunting competition, and told him that today's training was over. Enoch heard someone comment on him, saying that his skill was very good and qualified him to win the competition. And someone else said the moment had finally come. It was time for the Grey family to crush the Emblem family. But Enoch remembered that despite his win in the hunting competition, there was a greater truth between him and Cercia the moment they faced the monster. Cercia moved while he froze in place, and he felt he did not deserve all this praise. He sat alone under a tree and took out a letter from his mother in which she expressed her regret for being unable to see his performance because she was in Crichton. But she told him that the master of the house had promised to return her to the palace if there was good news from the hunting competition, and that she was confident he would be able to achieve that with his current skills, at which point she would also return. Enoch's mother ended her letter expressing how much she missed him, so Enoch folded the letter telling himself that this was enough, and that he would be able to see his mother soon. But fate had other plans, as Dana Grey disappeared under mysterious circumstances. At the Grey family estate, Enoch was training hard. The Emperor was watching him from afar, commenting that his performance was impressive as expected, especially his ability to kill a monster at such a young age. The Emperor asked Duke Jed Grey if he agreed with him. The Duke answered that he was referring to the monster the Emperor himself had released, and that this matter had crossed the lines, wondering which family would send their children to the hunting competition after this. He added that he heard the Bloodmore family had allowed their daughter to enter the forest, and asked the Emperor if this was also part of his intentions. The Emperor denied it, claiming innocence. The Duke realized the Emperor knew everything and asked him directly what he was planning. He accused him of gambling with children's lives as if it were a joke in a competition hosted by the Imperial family. The Emperor explained that without the presence of monsters, there was no other way to know the true capabilities of these children who would become future leaders, asserting that his knights were there and that it wasn't dangerous. He added that Enoch had shown the greatest skills as he desired, and asked the Duke if this wasn't what he wanted as well, for the Emperor had laid the foundation for choosing Enoch as the sword of the next Emperor. The Emperor expressed his sincere hope that this time a royal guard capable of protecting the Crown Prince would emerge from the Grey family. The Duke thought that if that happened, they would finally win their long struggle against the Emblem family, a victory he and his ancestors had long desired. But he wondered in confusion why the Emperor was giving him what he wanted so easily. The Emperor explained that, as the Duke knows, he is looking for a new knight. A young knight with a sharp mind, a genius who protects people from the monsters of Crichton, a knight like Enoch Grey, and wondered if he could become the hero of this era. The Duke acknowledged that there was no doubt that Enoch was a distinguished knight, but he added that granting him the title of Sword of the Emperor just because he is a genius is illogical, and asked the Emperor what he truly wanted. The Duke knew the Imperial family would never favor the Grey family without a reason. The Duke sighed and asked the Emperor if he could speak with him frankly as in the old days, if only for a moment. The Emperor agreed, saying it had been a long time since then. The Duke reminded the Emperor of his name, Marcian, pointing out that a long time had passed since Dana was sent to Crichton by Imperial order, and he asked him directly if something bad had happened to her. The Emperor admired the master's astuteness and told him that this would facilitate the conversation between them. The Duke realized that the Emperor's offer to make Enoch part of the Royal Guard meant he wanted him to remain silent about the disappearance of the Grey Knight commander. The Emperor confirmed his deduction and suggested that the matter of Dana's disappearance be ended in this way. He told him that he would have no choice but to accept, for such is politics. The Duke flew into a rage and asked the Emperor if he was the one who taught him to act this way, calling him a coward. He accused him of hiding because he feared being rebuked, which confused the Emperor. Duke Jed Grey sighed, saying that the Emperor must have spent his night in pain thinking of the compensation he would offer him, so that the Duke who lost his daughter wouldn't be able to utter a single word. The Emperor was flustered, claiming he was only conveying the position of the imperial family. But the Duke asked him to simply admit the truth, reminding him that the late Emperor knew this simple truth that he was ignorant of. He reminded him that when one makes a mistake, the apology must come first. And only after that can he think of showing courtesy to the Grey family, and added that since the Emperor learned swordsmanship, he must practice politics as someone who once carried a sword. For a person who carries a sword must never run from obstacles, or their head will be cut off in the blink of an eye. The Duke explained that he rebuked him because he did not want to make him an enemy of the Grey family, and announced the end of his overstepping lesson. The Duke bowed in farewell and left the hall. After his departure, the Emperor admitted to himself that he had tried to play a small trick on his master. The Emperor stopped the Duke, asking him for help if he still considered him his dear pupil. The Emperor revealed to his master that the Empress was targeting the Crown Prince's life, and that this was not mere suspicion, but a fact all nobles knew, and that she was not satisfied with poison, but sent killers and practiced ritual curses. He admitted he wanted Enoch to be the prince's royal guard, and that he did not care if he was from Grey or Emblem. All he needed was a knight who could sacrifice his life for the weak prince. The Duke looked at the Emperor and told him that he finally saw the face of Marcian, whom he once knew, who was fighting for a weak heir. The Emperor explained that news of Dana's disappearance would spread throughout Lunitas in a moment, and with the absence of the shield that repelled Crichton, refugees would appear. In the midst of this chaos, the Empress would make her move, and soon a bloody war for the throne would break out. The Emperor told him that Enoch was also from the Empress's family, so if she succeeded in seizing power, he would be abandoned because he is allied with Grey, and if she failed, he would be executed. The Emperor begged his master to stop the Empress. The Duke said he expected that, knowing Enoch's father is the Empress's younger brother. The Duke wondered about the sin that child committed to be separated from his mother at such a young age, and he wondered why he must be sacrificed to such a cruel fate. At the Emblem Palace, Benedict was wondering why Circia was not ready yet, so the butler told him he had conveyed the message. But she says she will not attend the medal ceremony, which surprised Benedict. Benedict suggested the Duke speak with her directly, and that this would be the best solution. Circia's father knocked on her room door and asked her anxiously if something bad had happened to her, but he was surprised when he found other girls in her room offering him sweets. Circia called him, and Olivia told her she had brought the maids with her. Circia told him she had also brought some delicious sweets and offered him some. Her father politely declined the offer and asked her if this behavior was not a bit rude toward the Marquis's daughter, and Olivia answered that she was doing it because she wanted to. Olivia explained to Benedict that she wanted to help her because Circia was injured while saving her. Circia understood and asked for some privacy because he wanted to discuss something, so Circia asked Olivia to allow them to speak privately, and Olivia immediately agreed. Her father remarked that this reminded him of her mother when she was young. He explained that he meant she would start to gain many followers as well, for her mother started the same way, with a follower or two at first, and now many nobles follow her. He told her that protecting others with the sword is a privilege for those who carry it, and praised her nobility, and Circia thanked him shyly. Then he reminded her that the hunting competition medal is one of these privileges, and asked her why she didn't want to attend the ceremony. She told him Enoch was the one who killed the monster, but he said the credit goes to her excellent stab. Her father realized she had another wish and asked her about it. Circia answered that she did indeed have a request. She explained to him that she didn't care about whether Enoch got the medal or not. All that mattered to her was her injured hand. She told him that the cast placed on her hand prevented her from training with the sword, and that she felt very bored. She begged him to allow her to train again, claiming she had fully healed. Her father politely refused her request, explaining that this was the doctor's decision and that the master of the house, her grandfather, had strictly forbidden training, but she insisted she wouldn't overtrain, and that she feared she would forget everything if she continued like this, and that Enoch was certainly still training. Her father hugged her, and she apologized to him for her stubbornness, justifying that she was upset. Her father thought to himself that he was worried she had matured too quickly, but this behavior was reassuring. He realized she was truly in love with swordsmanship, and that the blood of the Emblem family could not be denied. But Benedict told her it wasn't as if there was no way at all, so she asked him what he meant. He answered with a cunning smile, reminding her that he was the strategist of the Emblem family, and he told her she knew that, which is why she asked him for that request. At the medal ceremony, a noble stepped forward to congratulate Circia on her medal. Circia was surprised to see Sir Osric and asked him if he had joined the Emblem squad, and he thanked her, saying the credit went to her. He asked her about her arm, knowing that training had begun, so she told him she hadn't healed yet. She explained to him that she only started training the lower part of her body. She told him enthusiastically that her father said if her upper body was injured, she must train the lower, and if her right arm was injured, she must train the left. Osric was shocked by this logic and wondered if she truly had to go that far. Osric remarked that he felt her love for the sword during the hunting competition as well, and that her eyes truly shine when she talks about it. He thought to himself that if she weren't engaged to Sir Enoch, he would have asked her out on a date. His thoughts were interrupted by the appearance of Enoch, who asked him if he had rested well. Osric was flustered and told him he was about to eat. So Enoch asked him to enjoy his meal. Circia noticed Enoch seemed tense and wondered if he was tired. Enoch asked her if she remembered they were engaged, and she answered in the affirmative, wondering why he was asking. He answered no, justifying his sensitivity by the large number of people in the hall, and that he only wanted to return home and rest regardless of the medal. But Circia reminded him he was the main guest and asked him where he thought he was going, and he answered he didn't need it and he was just tired. The knights surrounding them thought his reaction was logical, for it's natural not to be in a good mood because he didn't kill the monster himself. While one of the Grey Knights commented that if it weren't for Enoch, one of the Emblem members would be a corpse now. One of the Grey Knights exploded in anger and accused the Emblem Knight of not knowing his place, and that he could wave a sword but couldn't think. The Emblem Knight replied mockingly, asking if he was finished with his speech and reminding him that his family was always in second place. The Grey Knight flew into a rage and asked who he was calling second place, and the other challenged him to settle the matter immediately. The Grey Knight agreed to the challenge, announcing they would see which family was truly the strongest. Enoch shouted at Circia, asking her to go and get an adult. In that moment, memories from her previous life returned to Circia, and she remembered the words of her enemy asking her if she had missed him. It was Yoon Do-yoon calling her detective. Enoch's voice interrupted her memories, calling her name repeatedly. Enoch looked at her bandaged hand. The Emblem Knights shouted at the Grey Knights, asking them to get that madman out of here. And the Grey Knights replied that today was the day to teach the Emblem scum a lesson. Knights from both sides gathered, ready for a confrontation, to determine who was truly the strongest. Suddenly, a noble stumbled and fell to the ground. One of the Emblem Knights wondered who pushed him. The young man claimed he tried to pass between them and stumbled. The Emblem Knights recognized him as Lord Edward. Lord Edward appeared smiling and greeted the members of the Emblem and Grey families. Circia called him uncle in surprise, while Enoch was shocked to see his father. Enoch looked at him in confusion and whispered the word, "Father?" Edward sighed, expressing how long he had been looking for them, and commented on the wonderful bread prepared by the Marchioness of Bloodmore. Then he politely asked if he could have tea time with the children. The knights immediately agreed and wished him an enjoyable time. Edward thanked them and asked Circia to follow him. He took her with him, and she thought to herself if beauty is stronger than the sword. After asking them to leave, Lord Edward opened the door to a side room, and with a calm smile told the two children to rest inside and come out when they were ready. Circia innocently asked about the sweets and whether her uncle would join them, but Enoch, who realized the situation, explained to her calmly that his father was only trying to keep them away from the fight. Circia realized it and thanked Edward enthusiastically for his concern, which surprised him, and she even wished for him to rest as well. Circia called Edward uncle affectionately, while Enoch only addressed his father coldly before he left them alone. As soon as they entered the room, Circia felt relieved that they were safe, but she wondered aloud why the knights suddenly started fighting. Circia drew Enoch's attention to a far sofa, where some people were lying on it. Enoch ignored what she said and looked at her seriously, wondering about her strange behavior in the hall earlier. Circia pretended not to understand, but Enoch insisted she knew exactly what he meant. He reminded her that she had clearly avoided him when he suggested calling the adults to break up the fight, and asked if he had done something to annoy her. Then he wondered if she was still upset because he got the credit for the hunting competition, but Circia answered in the negative. She assured him that this matter didn't matter to her at all, prompting Enoch to ask her for the real reason for her behavior then. Circia hesitated for a moment, then told him there was something she wanted to ask him. Enoch was surprised by the word request. Circia explained that it had been bothering her, and it wasn't something big, but she wouldn't tell him unless he promised to do it first. Enoch immediately objected, saying he needed to know the request before agreeing to it, but she insisted on her position. Enoch exploded in anger, considering this not a request but an order, so Circia stuttered and told him to forget the matter if he didn't want to. After a moment of thought, Enoch gave in and agreed to her request, asking her to just tell him. Circia's face lit up with joy, and she asked him to repeat what she was about to say. Enoch was surprised and asked her in confusion what he should repeat. Circia approached him and looked at him seriously, asking him to call her the title detective. Enoch was shocked by this strange request and remained silent for a while. Circia lost her patience and shouted at him to call her by the title immediately. Enoch wondered in confusion about the meaning of this request. Circia angrily urged him to do it quickly. In that moment, Circia was thinking to herself that this strange feeling of familiarity that haunted her whenever she looked at Enoch's face might find an explanation if he called her by this title, for she hoped to find a link between him and her arch-enemy from her previous life, Yoon Do-yeon. Enoch reluctantly uttered the word, detective, then asked her if she was satisfied now. Then he asked her seriously, "Are you really, Circia?" Circia tried to hide her internal turmoil and answered hesitantly that she didn't feel anything at all. She convinced herself that Enoch might be arrogant, but it was impossible for him to have any link to that man. When Enoch guessed that someone else must have called her by this title before, Circia was flustered and denied it quickly, asserting it wasn't a title and asking him to ignore the whole matter. Enoch denounced Circia's strange request, wondering how he was supposed to ignore something like this, appearing severely confused. But he soon fell silent and his features changed to seriousness, which Circia noticed, wondering why he didn't finish his sentence, as this was not like him. Enoch completely ignored the matter and told her that since he had fulfilled her request, it was her turn to promise him something, which puzzled Circia. In a firm tone, he demanded that she not do that again, explaining seriously not to look at him and see someone else in his features. He repeated his request insistently, asking her to promise him not to think of any other person while looking at him. Circia was surprised by his intensity but agreed immediately, wondering to herself why he mentioned such a thing. At that moment, the sounds of a commotion rose from outside the room, and Circia wondered what was happening, but Enoch called her name to grab her attention. Enoch insisted that she give him her promise first before they left the room. Circia felt strange about his behavior, thinking to herself how someone as small as him could evoke such complex feelings in people. She responded to his request, and they made a promise between them by linking their small fingers. After the situation ended, Circia suggested confusedly that they go out to check the source of the noise outside, and Enoch fell silent for a moment. Enoch calmly agreed to her suggestion. As they were heading toward the door, Circia noticed that despite his strange behavior, his features had completely relaxed, which made her feel relieved. When they opened the door, they found two adults talking about an important guest who was about to enter. Circia wondered about the identity of the newcomer, realizing it must be a figure that could only be met on special occasions like this. A majestic woman entered, and someone immediately announced that she was Her Majesty the Empress. It was Empress Isabel Leopold Rotinas, and beside her was the second prince, Adore Leopold Rotinas. Circia commented on the Empress's beauty and asked Enoch if she was his father's elder sister, and Enoch confirmed the matter, adding that his father does not talk about her much. Circia watched the Empress as she spoke with the nobles, noticing the great resemblance between her and her Uncle Edward, commenting on the strength of that family's genes. Suddenly, Lord Edward appeared calling for his son Enoch, so Circia welcomed him enthusiastically, calling him Uncle. Anxiety was clearly visible on Edward as he told Circia that he was forced to leave with Enoch due to an urgent matter that had arisen. The two children agreed immediately, but Circia noticed the paleness of her uncle's face and asked him anxiously if he was okay. Edward tried to pretend to be calm, claiming he was fine and that he had only sweated a little. Circia was not convinced by his answer, for she noticed he was shaking and his sweat was profuse. She concluded from his condition that he seemed afraid and alert for something bad to happen. Edward said goodbye to Circia, asking her to enjoy her time and be safe, then took Enoch to leave. While Circia was thinking of going to look for her father, the Empress stopped Lord Edward, calling him by name. The Empress asked him if he was really leaving without greeting his sister, whom he hadn't seen for a while. The Empress looked at him with reproach, expressing her pain at his behavior, and wondering if he truly did not understand his sister's heart. In a firm tone, she wondered if they would continue to treat each other this way, even though they are one family. The Empress's words stopped Edward in his tracks, and he seemed very tense as he bowed respectfully, offering his greetings to Her Majesty. The Empress welcomed him with a smile, expressing her happiness at seeing him and her greater happiness at seeing her nephew Enoch for the first time. But Edward interrupted her in a firm tone, explaining coldly that he had severed ties with his family, and therefore this child is not her nephew, and he is no longer her younger brother. Enoch looked at his father in shock and surprise, while Edward continued his speech, officially asking the Empress to withdraw her interest in his son. The Empress's features changed, and Edward claimed that he did not feel well and would excuse himself to leave. Circia noticed that the atmosphere in the hall became charged with tension, and while she was watching the situation, the Empress approached Edward and asked him with artificial concern about his illness, asserting that she, as his sister, wanted to be reassured about him. Edward exploded in anger and shouted in her face, asking her to stop calling herself his sister. He continued his shouting sharply, explaining that her continuous talk as if they were family caused him severe discomfort, and begged her to stop that. The Empress pretended to be sad, answering that the fact of them being family does not change even if he hated it, and asked him if he was still angry with her, which sparked whispers from the attendees who wondered about the reason for his exaggerated reaction. Circia was watching the scene in shock, for she had never seen her Uncle Edward with this anger before, while the Empress tried to calm him down, inviting him to talk and resolve the dispute between them as siblings. The whispering of the nobles continued about the insolence of Edward's behavior toward his sister the Empress, which increased Circea's confusion. Exhaustion and pain were clear on Edward, who held his head and pleaded with her to allow him to withdraw, because he did not feel well at all. Circea felt suspicious, thinking that the Empress insisted on calling him brother, despite his clear refusal, and that her behavior was strange and suspicious. She continued to analyze the situation, wondering why she did not allow him to leave simply if he was sick, especially after she approached him and asked him about the location of the pain, which confirmed to Circea that the Empress's personality was completely different from her gentle appearance. Circea realized she was on her uncle's side and began thinking of a way to help him, concluding that he could not leave without her permission due to strict imperial court etiquette. She resolved to find a way to get him out of this predicament. In a moment, an idea flashed in her mind, and she decided that the best solution was to cause a commotion to divert attention and provide an exit for her uncle. She rushed toward Edward, shouting with artificial concern, drawing everyone's attention to his cold sweat and the state of fatigue he seemed to be in, and reminded him that he was already suffering from a fever, and his face had become completely pale. Then she turned to Enoch and winked at him, asking him for help to take out his father who needed rest immediately. Enoch understood the plan immediately and grabbed his father while urging him to return to the palace quickly, expressing his concern that he might collapse again as had happened in the past. The nobles began whispering among themselves, confirming that Sir Edward truly seemed unwell and that he must leave to rest. Circea shouted again, asserting that it was impossible for the Empress not to notice her uncle's suffering, and that he would inevitably collapse if the situation continued like this. She added that if her uncle collapsed here, it would constitute a major scandal for the imperial family. Faced with this pressure, the Empress had no choice but to tell Edward to leave. The Empress smiled maliciously and added that she wouldn't have kept him here knowing of his illness, and that everything she said was out of concern for him. Circea's suspicions were confirmed, for if the Empress were truly concerned, she would have allowed him to leave from the beginning. Edward cast one last sharp look at the Empress, then officially excused himself and left with his son Enoch. After they left, Circea found herself standing alone before the Empress and felt regret that she hadn't left with them. The Empress smiled calmly, but Circea felt her heart beating strongly and realized that anyone could see the suppressed anger behind that smile. Circea tried to reassure herself, justifying her action by saying she didn't say anything wrong, for her uncle was truly suffering, and the Empress, as his sister, was supposed to be more understanding of his condition. She swallowed hard in tension and convinced herself that she wasn't afraid, and that she had simply done the right thing. Circea approached the Empress and apologized for her delay in offering greetings, then introduced herself as Circea of the Emblem family. The Empress smiled and replied that she was then the young lady of the Emblem family. The Empress commented that she seemed very interested in Edward, and expressed her happiness at having someone else care about him as much as she did. Circea replied with an innocent laugh, asserting that she sincerely cares for her uncle, explaining that true concern means feeling another's pain and their desire not to speak. The Empress's features completely changed upon hearing these words, and she felt extreme anger at the insolence of this young child. But Circea faced her with a look of defiance, directing coded words to her to the effect that she did not care for her position as Empress, and all she cared about was for her to stop bothering her uncle. Then she added with childish irony that she was sure someone like her would not truly get angry with a 7-year-old child. The Empress regained her composure and smiled, commenting that the young lady from the Emblem family was very charming, and that this behavior was exactly what she expected from a member of the Emblem family. Then she called for her son Ador to leave, adding that it was unfortunate they couldn't see Enoch and Edward, but she was sure there would be other opportunities in the future. Circea bowed to bid them farewell while the Empress left with her son. Immediately after they left, Circea wondered to herself about the hidden meaning behind the Empress's last words. While she was distracted, her instructor approached her and asked where she had been, so she asked him for some water. She told him she was speaking with Her Majesty the Empress, then asked him directly if the Empress hated the Emblem family. He answered in the affirmative and revealed to her that the man the Empress loved had proposed to her mother, Lady Melcia, in the past, which took Circea by surprise. Circea was even more shocked when she learned that this man was none other than His Majesty the Emperor himself. The instructor laughed, explaining that the Emperor ended up marrying the Empress, so things turned out well. But Circea realized at that moment the reason for the Empress's deep hatred for her family. Circea felt anxious, wondering if she had provoked the Empress's anger with her behavior, but she tried to calm herself by thinking she was still a young child, and that it was unlikely anything bad would happen to her. Later that night, her mother was searching for her anxiously in the palace. Her mother suddenly burst into her room calling her name, which woke Circea from her sleep. Circea woke up asking her mother in confusion what was happening, so her mother faced her angrily, asking exactly what she had said to Her Majesty the Empress. Circea answered that she had not said anything strange, but her mother scolded her sternly, asserting that she should not have spoken to her at all. Circea defended herself, saying she knew nothing, but her mother interrupted her, asking angrily why she did it. In the middle of this quarrel, her father entered the room calling for his wife. He tried to calm his anxious wife, reminding her that they had never told Circea about the Empress, while the mother commented that what happened was the worst possible meeting for her with her. The father embraced his wife, who seemed moved, especially with what had recently happened to Dana, and tried to reassure her. Circia was watching her parents anxiously, feeling that her mother was in severe pain, and wondered if something bad had happened to Aunt Dana. Her mother asked to be alone for a moment, and her husband immediately agreed. After her mother left, her father sat beside her on the bed. Circia asked him directly if something had happened to Aunt Dana. Her father told her that he did not know the details either, and that he and her mother were waiting for her grandfather to arrive to explain everything to them. He added that her mother must have been shocked to hear about her confrontation with the Empress, so Circia felt guilty and wondered if she had committed a grave mistake. Her father invited her to come closer and hugged her tenderly while reassuring her. Her father reassured her that everything was fine, and that if she committed a mistake, she could simply apologize for it later, so she promised him she would. He explained to her that her mother was very worried right now because of what happened to Lady Dana. While Circia was taking in the news, she heard loud shouting coming from elsewhere in the palace. Her father went out to see what was happening. Her mother, Melcia, was facing her grandfather in a violent sword duel. Melcia accused her father of lying, asserting that he did not save Dana on purpose simply because she belonged to the Grey family. She shouted in his face angrily, accusing him that the family name was more important to him than a human life, and her grandfather flew into a rage at her insulting him. Circia's father closed the balcony window to block the sound of the fight, and Circia asked him in confusion what was happening. Her father calmly asked her not to leave her room, so she asked him the reason for her mother and grandfather's fight. Her father touched her cheek gently and told her he would go to check on the matter, and asked her to wait for him in her room, and she reluctantly agreed. Her father tried to reassure her as much as possible, smiling at her and comforting her. But after he left, Circia felt with her intuition that something terrible had happened. Anxiety took hold of her, and she wondered to herself what had truly happened to Aunt Dana. Despite her concern for her aunt, her thoughts soon turned to Enoch, realizing that he must have been looking forward intensely to his mother's return. She remembered his words to her previously, where he told her that if he won the competition, he would be able to live with his mother again. She realized that he must be waiting for her return impatiently. Circia began to piece together the threads of what happened, remembering that her mother said Dana was injured and that she had been in Crichton all this time, and wondered about the severity of her injury. A terrifying thought occurred to her. Could her injury be so severe that she would never be able to return? She wondered anxiously if Enoch had heard this news. Fear took hold of her that Enoch might do something reckless, such as running away to Crichton in search of his mother. Meanwhile, Enoch was already preparing to leave, determined to find his mother himself. As Circia later learned, her father chose not to tell her anything that day to protect her, but the very next day, news of Aunt Dana's disappearance topped the headlines of the Rotina's weekly newspaper. Thus, Circia knew the reason for the charged atmosphere that hung over her house. For the disappearance of someone with Dana's skill in Crichton was a momentous event, so much so that refugees had begun to appear. While she was reading the newspaper, her maid Josiah tried to stop her, advising her not to read such sad news, but Circia insisted that she should at least know what was going on in the country. Josiah reminded her that she was still 7 years old and there was no need to worry about such matters, and asked if she had eaten her food, so Circia replied that she was waiting for her father to eat with him. Josiah told her that Lord Benedict had gone to their lands to deal with the refugee problem, and that her mother had headed to the imperial palace early in the morning. Circia wondered about her grandfather, and guessed he must have gone to the palace too, and felt suddenly lonely. Josiah tried to reassure her that they would all return, but Circia replied sarcastically that she wanted to enjoy being alone for a while. At that point, Josiah told her she wasn't alone and that she was there with her, so Circia was deeply moved and turned to her maid, expressing her gratitude. Josiah assured her she would always stand by her side. After she had calmed down a bit, Circia asked her maid if she could go to visit the Grey House, but Josiah flatly refused her request. Circia asked angrily for the reason for the refusal, so Josiah explained to her that everyone in the Grey family believes that Lady Dana's disappearance is her grandfather's fault, and that her visit at this time would not be welcome at all. But Circia tried to convince her that she was Enoch's fiancée, and that the Grey family might treat her differently. But Josiah rejected the idea entirely, prompting Circia to declare that she would go to train with the sword instead, to which Josiah immediately agreed. At the training ground, Circia felt very sorry for Enoch and thought she should do something about it. While she was contemplating the training dummy, she suddenly realized that this dummy had always been by her side at all times, whether in rain or snow. It had been her constant companion when she felt lonely due to the absence of her parents and grandfather, so she was deeply moved. Driven by her strong emotions, she placed her hand on the dummy, but she was surprised when the dummy fell to the ground after its base shattered. She felt shock and regret, wondering why this was happening now of all times. She collapsed on the ground crying, calling for her parents and grandfather, and expressing her deep concern for Enoch and her fear of the monsters of Crichton. In the middle of her crying, she heard a voice asking her the reason for her extreme distress. She raised her head to find her grandfather standing before her, and she shouted his name happily. She ran toward him and hugged him tightly as he calmed her down. She asked her grandfather if something bad had happened to him at the imperial palace, and he told her he had decided to renounce his title as responsibility for Dana's disappearance. Circia was surprised by her grandfather's calmness and shouted at him, asking how he could say that so simply, and if he realized the danger of no longer being a duke. He answered seriously that the title proves nothing about his true identity. He explained to her that his sword and his way of life are only what? Prove who he is, and wondered if it mattered as long as he had a wonderful granddaughter like her. Cersei was deeply moved by his profound words about the sword and the lifestyle. Her grandfather advised her always to remember that if she wants to stand tall one day, she must live a life with a solid foundation. She answered enthusiastically that she understood the lesson. Her grandfather was moved by her response, then told her that he had stopped by the palace and bought her a gift. Cersei got very excited at the word gift. He presented her with a lace hat and she liked it very much. Then he told her in a serious tone that he wouldn't be able to visit her much anymore because he was forced to return to the Crichton Forest. So she begged him not to go, reminding him that Aunt Dana had disappeared there and the place was dangerous. Her grandfather reassured her that Dana would be fine, but she wondered about the meaning of his words and if he really knew what happened. He told her that he couldn't explain everything now, but he assured her that Dana was fine and asked her not to worry too much. However, she asked him to promise her to return to visit her on her birthday every year, reminding him of her sadness at him not being there this year. Her grandfather laughed and promised her he would definitely return, so Cersei was very happy. At that moment, her grandfather heard a strange sound coming from her stomach. Cersei was flustered and told him she hadn't eaten yet, and her grandfather flew into a rage, shouting and asking who dared to let his granddaughter skip her meal. Meals were of the utmost importance to her grandfather, to the point that he completely forgot his Cold War with her mother and began scolding them together for their neglect. Similarly, her mother placed great importance on meals, even forgetting her anger at her grandfather and busying herself with a profuse apology because she had left her daughter hungry. While Cersei was eating her food, she realized that skipping a meal sometimes might not be a bad thing, for this was the lesson she learned from this situation. She thought of her previous life, where she didn't have a family that grumbled about her being alone, whereas now everyone makes a big fuss just because she skipped one meal. Despite her gratitude for this love, a corner of her heart remained unsettled, for her thoughts turned to Enoch, realizing that he must be alone now. Her anxiety increased as she wondered when she would see him again, and if he had even eaten his food. After her maid, Jasiah, bid her farewell, wishing her a quiet night, her peace did not last long. Jasiah returned to tell her a curious piece of news, which was that Lord Enoch had run away from his home again, which shocked Cersei. Cersei tried to pretend not to care, wondering why she should care about him, so the maid smiled as if she understood what she was hiding. Cersei continued her pretense, wondering about his age that makes him run away from home all the time, but her real concern soon appeared, and she wondered to herself where he could go under these bad circumstances and the spread of refugees everywhere. While she was standing on her balcony, a sudden suspicion occurred to her. She smiled mockingly, realizing that mouse who came last time hadn't forgotten the way and had come once again.